Imagine for a second that you decide to just up and move to a brand new country.
Oh, wow. Okay. Big life change.
Right. And, we always romanticize that, right? The fresh start.
Yeah, the exotic food, the architecture. It's a very appealing fantasy.
Exactly. But it's kind of like jumping into the deep end of a pool without actually knowing how to swim.
Oh, man. Yeah, that is terrifying.
Right. Like that initial leap is super thrilling. The wind is in your hair, but the reality of actually having to stay afloat quickly sets in. And you realize, you don't have the skills yet.
That is a highly accurate analogy, honestly. It's a profound shock to your whole system.
Welcome to the deep dive, by the way. Today, we are exploring this amazing narrative from the Easy English podcast.
Really fantastic source material today.
Yeah, it's a piece titled Amir's Journey, The Courage to Adapt and Speak. And we are going to focus specifically on a story in there called Living in Another Country.
Which is just so relatable for anyone who has done this.
Oh, 100%. So our mission for you today is to unpack the very real and honestly often completely hidden psychological and practical stages of moving to a new culture.
And learning a new language, which is the core of it all.
Right. Okay, let's unpack this because we're not just talking about vocabulary lists here.
No, not at all. What's fascinating here is how Amir's story maps out this really classic cross-cultural adaptation curve.
Yeah, the source material does that so well.
It really does. It shows that language isn't just about knowing words. It's about literally navigating your world.
Which brings us right to Amir's specific experience. At the start, he's totally in that honeymoon phase we were just talking about.
The initial thrill of the new.
Exactly. The source describes him, walking down these new streets, trying all this new food. It's also novel and exciting.
Everything feels like an adventure at first.
Right, but then that thrill suddenly just crashes right into the friction of daily tasks. He hits this massive wall of reality.
The logistics of just existing in society.
Yeah. I mean, think about it. He goes to a cafe, right? And he just wants to order some food, but he literally can't articulate it clearly.
The language barrier suddenly becomes a physical barrier.
And it gets worse. He's at a store, he needs help finding something, but he feels way too nervous to even ask a question. He just stays completely silent.
Oh, that silence is so heavy too.
And then at work, work is just overwhelming for him because everyone is speaking so fast, he can't keep up.
It's pure cognitive overload. His brain is just redlining, trying to process all of it.
So his internal state just plummets. He's hesitating to speak. This deep loneliness starts creeping in, and he's just really missing his home and his family.
Because home is where things are easy, where you don't have to translate your existence.
Exactly. And it leads to this super heavy moment where he's just sitting there asking himself, did I make the right decision?
Which is an awful place to be mentally.
But I want to push back on this just a little bit because, thinking about the mental toll of this constant low-level translation,
Yeah, good.
is the language barrier we see Amir facing just, a lack of words? Or is it actually a sudden loss of identity and agency?
Oh, it is absolutely a loss of identity. That is such a crucial point.
Really? Like, just from not knowing the right words for a coffee?
Well, psychologists actually call this the silent phase of adaptation.
Mm-hmm.
And the psychological weight of it is immense.
How so?
Because when you cannot express your personality, your humor, or even just your basic needs in simple transactions, your world literally shrinks.
Wow, your world shrinks. That makes so much sense.
Right? You become a lesser version of yourself in the eyes of your community. And this raises an important question, Rolly.
What's that?
How do we even measure our own success in a totally foreign environment when our basic communication tools are just stripped away from us?
Man, if you measure it by ordering a coffee smoothly, you're going to feel like a failure every day.
Exactly. It's
Exactly.
incredibly isolating.
But thankfully, Amir doesn't stay isolated forever. This brings us to the external catalyst that completely changes his trajectory.
Yes, the power of human connection.
Right. Enter Sophie, his neighbor.
Sophie's a great character in this narrative.
She really is. So they run into each other, and she just asks this really simple question. She says, "Hi, how are you finding life here?"
Such a casual question, but so loaded.
And at first, Amir hesitates. The instinct is to just say, oh, everything is great, right? To hide the struggle.
Of course. Nobody wants to admit they're failing at life.
But he takes a risk. He offers this really honest confession. He tells her it's difficult and that he feels nervous.
Which takes a lot of bravery, honestly.
And Sophie's reaction is just, it's perfect. She doesn't pity him. She just listens kindly and totally normalizes his struggle.
Validation is so powerful.
She literally tells him that's completely normal. And then she gives him some really crucial advice.
What does she tell him?
She says to speak every day, don't be afraid of making mistakes, ask questions. And she drops this great line. She says, learning happens in real life, not just in books.
I love that line. It's so practical.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. I look at Sophie kind of like a trail guide on a mountain hike.
Okay, I like this. A trail guide.
Yeah, when you're hiking and your legs are burning, you're exhausted, and you think you're failing.
Right, you want to give up.
A good trail guide doesn't carry your backpack for you. They don't flatten the mountain. They just look at you and say, hey, this path is steep. The pain means you're actually on the correct trail.
That is exactly what she does. She assures him he's on the right path.
But, okay, let me play devil's advocate for a second. Is simply being told it's normal really enough to change someone's mindset and pull them out of a slump like that?
It actually is. Because it breaks the cycle of shame.
Shame. Just from struggling with a language.
Absolutely. Sophie removes the shame Amir felt about his struggles. Before that, he probably thought there was something wrong with him.
Like he wasn't smart enough or something?
Exactly. But language learning isn't just a solitary academic exercise you do in a vacuum. It requires a safe social environment to flourish.
Oh, so Sophie provided that safety.
Yes. By validating him, she lowered his anxiety, which literally makes his brain more receptive to learning.
That is wild. But of course, inspiration has to be followed by actual execution, right?
Always. The mindset shift is just step one.
Right. So we have to look at the specific, practical actions Amir takes next, the actual toolkit he uses to adapt.
Yes, the source gives us a really detailed look at that.
It does. And we have the exact book titles he used from the narrative. First, he starts with a book called Short Stories in English for Beginners. Teach Yourself.
A classic starting point.
Yeah, he finds a lot of comfort in the simple, clear sentences. But here's the crucial part. He doesn't just read it silently. He reads it again out loud.
Which is physically training his mouth, not just his brain.
Right. And then he graduates to the next level. He picks up Learn English Through Stories, 16 stories to improve your English grammar and English vocabulary.
Well, that's a good step up. More complex structures.
Exactly. And with this one, he actively practices speaking and repeating the phrases.
Which really mirrors building muscle memory.
Yeah, it totally is. It's kind of like riding a bike. You can't just read a book about balance, right?
Of course not. You just fall over.
You actually have to get on the bike and physically pedal. And then, following Sophie's recommendation, he uses one more resource.
What's the third one?
It's called Effortless English. Learn to speak English like a native. And his method for this is wild to me.
Oh, the walking around part.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
He puts his headphones on, listens while walking around the city, and repeats the sentences quietly to himself in public.
Which has to feel so strange at first.
Oh, completely. The narrative even points out how strange and uncomfortable it initially feels to just walk around in public muttering to yourself.
I mean, people might look at you funny, but it works.
It really does. But why does that work so well?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, it's all about the mechanics of active versus passive learning.
Okay, unpack that a bit. Active versus passive.
Sure. So earlier at work, Amir was trying to comprehend fast talkers silently. That is passive learning, and it's overwhelming.
Like trying to drink from a fire hose.
Right. But by muttering to himself, he transitions to actively training his vocal cords in his ears in a controlled but still slightly distracting environment.
He's forcing his brain to process the language while also navigating the sidewalk and traffic.
Exactly. He's building real-world conversational stamina.
Which brings us to the compound interest of all this trying, going from these private practice sessions to actual public performance.
The real-world results of his daily effort.
Yes. And the source material revisits those initial friction points we talked about earlier to show his growth.
The cafe, the store, and work.
Right. So he goes back to the cafe. And this time, his voice is more confident. He just says, I'd like a coffee, please.
Simple, but a massive victory for him.
Huge. And then at the store, the words come easily when he asks for help. He's not paralyzed anymore.
The fear is gone, or at least manageable.
Exactly. And then at work, and I love this detail, he doesn't understand everything, but he understands more.
Which is such an important realistic detail. It's not magic.
Right. The narrative emphasizes that weeks have passed. He persists despite still making mistakes.
Because mistakes are just data. They tell you what to fix.
Yeah, and it all comes together in this second encounter with Sophie. She sees him and notes that he looks different. She says he looks more confident.
And he feels it too.
Yeah, he agrees with her. He says, I feel different. So what does this all mean?
It's a fundamental transformation.
It really really is. I mean, to me, this slow progression is a lot like leveling up in a video game.
Ooh, I like that analogy. How so?
Well, you often don't notice your stats increasing day by day. You're just doing the daily grind.
Right, grinding for experience points.
Exactly. Until suddenly you easily defeat a boss or, order a coffee that used to completely overwhelm you.
That is a perfect way to put it. You don't see the growth until you are tested by the environment.
So what is the core lesson we take away from all this source material?
Well, the core lesson is that living in another country is fundamentally not just about learning a language.
What is it about then?
It is a crucible. It's a test for growing, adapting, and basically becoming a stronger version of yourself.
Wow, a stronger version of yourself.
Yeah. Every small step, and especially every mistake, is an absolutely necessary part of that growth.
It's not a detour, it's the actual path.
Exactly.
So, to summarize all of this for you listening right now, if you are learning a new language or starting a new job or living in a new place, you are not alone in that struggle.
Not at all. It is universally difficult.
It is incredibly challenging, but by speaking just a little every day, being patient with yourself and not being afraid to try and make mistakes,
You are getting better every single day.
you really are. And before we wrap up this deep dive, I think we have one final provocative thought to leave you with.
Yes, building on Amir's realization that he actually felt different as a person.
Right. It goes way beyond just vocabulary.
It does. Think about this. If learning how to communicate in a new environment fundamentally shifts our confidence in how we move through the world,
Yeah.
does acquiring a new language mean we are actually constructing an entirely new version of our personality? Are you ever truly the same person in your second language as you are in your first? Have you ever noticed that the smarter you get in your native language, the dumber you feel when you're trying to operate in a new one?
Oh, absolutely. It's a very real thing.
Right. It's this incredibly frustrating paradox. You have, decades of life experience. You've got a nuanced understanding of the world and highly complex ambitions.
Yeah, you're an adult with adult thoughts.
Exactly. But then you put yourself in a situation where you have to articulate those sophisticated thoughts in a language you're, still mastering.
And suddenly you're struggling to say anything beyond like what you had for breakfast.
Yes. You just completely freeze up. Today, we are dissecting a phenomenon known as the ambition freeze. It's that exact neurological moment where your vocabulary basically betrays your intellect.
Which is such a great way to put it.
And we're going to explore this through a really fascinating case study found in our source material today. It's an excerpt titled The Grammar of Ambition, Expressing Future Plans with Confidence.
Right. And the case study focuses on a language learner named Liam. But the psychological mechanisms at play here, they really apply to anyone who has ever choked under the pressure of trying to sound smart.
Oh, totally. We've all been there.
Yeah, I mean, when someone asks a sprawling, open-ended question like, what are your plans for the future, they aren't just making small talk,
No, not at all.
They are essentially demanding that you synthesize your entire life's trajectory, your values, your professional goals, all on the spot.
Which is hard enough to do in your native tongue.
Exactly. Doing that in your native language is tough. But doing it while simultaneously juggling the mechanics of a second language, it triggers a very specific kind of cognitive overload.
Okay, let's unpack this because we need to start by looking at Liam's specific predicament.
Right.
The source material paints a picture of a guy who has actually put in the work. I mean, he's not a beginner.
No, he's quite advanced in some areas.
Yeah, he reads English at a high level. He listens to podcasts. His passive understanding is excellent. But there is this massive disconnect between his input and his output.
A huge gap.
Right. When that dreaded question about the future comes up, he doesn't just stumble. He completely halts. He actually talks about this internal monologue where he's thinking to himself, I want to answer, but I just don't know how.
Yeah, and that gap between passive comprehension and active generation, that's actually one of the most heavily researched areas in linguistics and cognitive psychology.
Wait, really?
Oh, yeah. What Liam is experiencing, it isn't a lack of vocabulary. It's actually a failure of working memory under stress.
So his brain is basically just getting overwhelmed.
Precisely. See, when we read or listen, our brain is in pattern recognition mode. It relies really heavily on context clues, so it requires relatively low cognitive effort.
You're just absorbing.
Right.
Like-
But active speech generation, especially when we're talking about abstract concepts like the future, it requires us to do so many things at once.
Like,
Well, we have to retrieve vocabulary, conjugate verbs, apply syntax rules, and monitor the social reactions of our listener all at the exact same time.
it makes me think of, like, how a computer's RAM works.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
Yeah, like Liam's brain is just a browser with way too many tabs open. He has one tab open for the complex, abstract vision of his career.
Right.
And then another tab is frantically searching for the correct modal verbs to express a hypothetical future.
Yes, exactly.
Then a third tab is running a spell check on his pronunciation. And a fourth tab is monitoring the facial expressions of the person he's talking to, scanning for judgment.
And eventually the RAM just completely maxes out.
The system crashes, the screen freezes.
Yeah.
It's like he has this beautifully furnished house, but the front door is completely jammed.
Mm-hmm.
All this data, these rich, beautiful ambitions, they're inside his head. But the processing power required to export them in real time is just overloaded. The mechanism is broken.
What's fascinating here is the biological cascade that follows that system crash.
The biological cascade.
Yeah. When the cognitive load exceeds your working memory's capacity, the brain actually interprets that failure as a threat.
Wow, really? A threat?
Yes. The amygdala fires, cortisol spikes, and you experience what linguist Stephen Krashen famously called the affective filter.
The affective filter.
Right. It's this invisible neurological wall that just shoots up and completely blocks language production.
Oh, wow.
And the irony is that Liam actually knows the words he needs. The data is on the hard drive, so to speak.
But the door is jammed.
Exactly. The stress of trying to formulate the absolute perfect, most sophisticated response has completely severed his access to the vocabulary.
So he's trapped.
Yeah.
Which brings us to this mentor character in the source material named Olivia.
Yes, Olivia is key here.
She steps in and does something really crucial before she even teaches him a single word.
Yeah.
She normalizes the freeze.
That is such an important step.
Yeah, she tells him that feeling stuck isn't a symptom of poor language skills.
Yeah.
It's a totally standard reaction to cognitive overload.
Right.
And just that validation alone seems to act as this, like, pressure release valve for him.
Absolutely. It brings the cortisol back down.
But her actual practical solution is what I found so intriguing and honestly a bit counterintuitive.
How so?
Well, she doesn't give him advanced vocabulary to match his adult ambitions. She actually prescribes absolute structural simplicity.
She does.
The source lists the exact menu of phrases she gives him. It's things like, I'm planning to, I want to, I hope to, I'm going to, and in the future, I would like to.
Yeah, she is essentially telling him to reboot his brain in safe mode. By providing him with these highly functional, really rigid structures, she is artificially constraining his options.
See, I have to push back on this approach, though.
Okay, why?
Put yourself in the shoes of an adult professional.
Yeah.
If you have complex, mature ambitions, like maybe you're trying to launch a tech startup or you're pivoting your entire career to a new industry, starting a sentence with, I want to, feels incredibly reductive.
I can see that.
It almost borders on infantile, right? Like, if the goal is to project confidence and articulate a sophisticated vision for the future, doesn't resorting to the language of a toddler completely undermine you?
Well, it feels reductive only if we conflate the complexity of our grammar with the complexity of our ideas.
Say more about that.
This is a massive trap for adult learners. Adults inherently want to sound like adults.
Right.
We are so used to commanding respect through our nuance and our expansive vocabulary. So when we are forced to use basic syntax, our ego just rebels. We feel stupid.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But Olivia's core rule in the text confronts this ego directly. Her mandate to Liam is very clear. She says, you don't need complicated grammar, just start simple and then add more details.
So she's arguing that the maturity of the thought will actually shine through, regardless of the grammatical vehicle carrying it.
Exactly, and she proves it with the specific example. She models a sentence for Liam. She says, I'm planning to improve my English next year because I want better opportunities.
Okay, simple enough.
Right. Let's dissect the mechanics of that sentence. From a syntactic standpoint, I'm planning to and I want, those are foundational. A 5-year-old uses those exact structures to ask for a toy.
Right.
But a 5-year-old does not possess the semantic concept of long-term language acquisition for the purpose of career advancement.
Yeah.
By separating the cognitive load of the syntax from the cognitive load of the semantics, Olivia solves the RAM problem.
That's brilliant.
You use a pre-packaged, zero-effort grammatical structure so that you can dedicate 100% of your brain's processing power to the complexity of your actual idea.
Yeah,
You are removing the friction of the how so you can actually deliver the what.
exactly.
If you don't have to build your vehicle from scratch every single time you speak, you can focus on what you're driving. That completely shifts how we view these basic phrases. They aren't training wheels. They are highly efficient delivery systems. And this transition from theory to execution is where the narrative really gains its traction. Because having a streamlined framework is useless if your basal ganglia, the part of the brain responsible for habit formation and automaticity, if that part hasn't been trained to use the framework under pressure.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the source material details the actual mechanics of Liam's evening practice routine.
Yes, his routine is fascinating.
He goes home, alone in his room, and he speaks out loud. But he doesn't just read paragraphs. He builds them.
Right, systematically.
Yeah. He starts with a base structure, saying out loud, "I want to improve my English." Then the text notes, he pauses. That pause is the key.
Yes, it is.
After he pauses, he stacks the motivation onto the base, because I want to travel. And over the course of several days, he leverages this stacking method to create increasingly complex thoughts. Like, in the future, I would like to travel to different countries and speak English with people.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this stacking method is a brilliant application of cognitive scaffolding.
Cognitive scaffolding.
Yeah. Instead of trying to generate a massive, multifaceted paragraph in one huge burst of mental effort, he is relying on algorithmic compounding.
It really makes me think of building with Lego blocks. And I don't mean that in a superficial child's play kind of way, but in terms of structural integrity.
Oh, absolutely.
You don't grab 50 scattered pieces and try to assemble a complete roof in midair. It would just shatter in your hands.
Right.
You start with one solid, immovable base block. For Liam, that block is the chunked phrase. It's a closed-loop neural pathway. He snaps it down onto the table. It is secure.
Yes.
It requires absolutely zero working memory to maintain. And once that block is locked in, his brain is completely free to search for the next logical piece, the because block.
Exactly.
By snapping these discrete, easily manageable subroutines together, he is engineering a complex sentence without ever overloading his cognitive capacity.
And that neurological scaffolding is exactly what prevents the freeze, because he never asks his brain to hold more than one block at a time. The text also highlights the specific environmental conditions he uses to cement this habit. He writes his goals down, reinforcing the neural pathways through a multimodal approach. But most importantly, he speaks out loud, alone.
Now, why is this solitude so critical to the mechanism?
Yeah.
I mean, if the goal is to speak to other people, shouldn't he practice with other people?
Well, practicing with other people reintroduces the very variable that causes the crash in the first place, the social evaluation threat.
Oh, right, the judgment.
Exactly. When you are alone, the affective filter drops to zero. There is no ego to protect. There's no listener whose microexpressions might trigger an anxiety spike.
So it's totally safe.
Yeah. By practicing the physical, motor articulatory mechanics of speech in a zero-stakes environment, Liam achieves automaticity. His mouth gets used to forming the words while his brain gets used to connecting the concepts. And the source describes the outcome of this perfectly. It says his thoughts become clearer and his sentences become smoother.
I really want to highlight that exact phrasing from the text. It doesn't just say his pronunciation improved or like his vocabulary grew. It says his thoughts became clearer.
Yes.
The act of forcing his sprawling, abstract ambitions into these rigid structural blocks actually organized the chaotic mess inside his own head.
Which is a profound realization about the nature of language itself, really. We tend to view language merely as a broadcasting tool.
Like a radio tower.
Exactly, just a way to transmit a fully formed thought from my brain to yours. But cognitive linguists argue that language is actually a constitutive tool.
Constitutive, so it builds things.
Right. It is the very mechanism we use to structure and refine our own thinking. By artificially restricting himself to simple syntax, Liam was forced to distill his sprawling ambitions down to their absolute essence.
And that distillation leads us right to the climax of the case study. Because Liam has been practicing in a vacuum. He has built the neural pathways, he's stacked his blocks until the subroutines are fully automatic.
He's put in the reps.
Yeah. And then the inevitable happens. He is out in the real world, and someone asks him the exact question that triggered the system crash in the beginning of our deep dive. What are your plans for the future?
The ultimate test of the working memory under social pressure.
Exactly. But this time, the text tells us the freeze doesn't happen. The working memory doesn't overload. He doesn't panic.
Right.
His voice is calm, and his message is immediately clear. Let me actually read the exact response he delivers straight from the source.
Yeah.
He says, I'm planning to improve my English and travel in the future because I want to experience new cultures.
It is a total triumph of cognitive management.
Totally.
I mean, the sentence itself is mechanically flawless, but more importantly, it is deeply communicative. He seamlessly links his immediate action, improving his English, with a midterm goal, traveling.
Right.
And then he anchors them both to a profound underlying value, which is experiencing new cultures. And he does it all using the foundational Lego blocks he practiced in his room.
So what does this all mean when we look at this complete transformation from Liam experiencing total linguistic paralysis, to delivering this incredibly grounded, confident declaration? I have a question for you.
Sure, go ahead.
Do you think the turning point was the structural framework itself? Like, was it the specific menu of phrases Olivia provided? Or was it the psychological shift of granting himself permission to drop the facade of the native-speaking poet?
Oh, the specific phrases were merely the catalyst. The true turning point was absolutely the psychological shift. Yeah. I mean, the vocabulary Liam utilized words like planning, travel, and because those were already in his mental database long before the story began.
That's true.
What he lacked was the permission to use them without shame. The core insight we can extract from this material is that communicating your future, whether in a second language or your native tongue, is never about syntactic perfection. It is entirely about clarity of intent.
Clarity of intent over perfection.
Exactly. When Liam abandoned the adult ego's demand for complex grammar, he bypassed the neurological bottleneck that was suffocating his expression. The actionable blueprint here is undeniable. Anchor your thoughts in simplicity, systematically stack your details, and practice until the pathway becomes automatic.
It really requires you to be brave enough to sound simple. Like, if you can let go of the need to impress people with your linguistic gymnastics, you actually give yourself the bandwidth to impress them with your ideas.
Well said.
We have covered a massive amount of ground today. We started with the universal dread of the ambition freeze, dissecting how the pressure to summarize our complex lives just overloads our working memory and crashes the system.
And we examined how applying structural simplicity acts as a cognitive safe mode, separating the heavy lifting of grammar from the heavy lifting of abstract thought.
Right. And we broke down the mechanics of the stacking method.
Yeah.
Using those sturdy linguistic Lego blocks to create complex algorithmic subroutines in a low-stakes environment, allowing the brain to finally achieve automaticity. Ultimately, we saw how abandoning the ego of perfection unlocks genuine, unhesitating confidence. I want to leave you with the final direct plea from our source material today.
It's a great takeaway.
It states, if someone asks you about your future, don't stay silent. Speak. Even if your sentences are incredibly simple. Because every single sentence you form bridges the gap between passive understanding and active confidence. You don't need to construct a massive, complex architecture of vocabulary on the spot. You just need to lay down one solid block and then another.
It is a highly practical framework for communication, but as we step back and look at the broader implications of this deep dive, I think there is a hidden layer here that extends far beyond language learning.
Oh yeah, what do you mean?
Well, we have spent this entire conversation analyzing how simple sentences help us project our ambitions outward, allowing others to finally understand our goals. But perhaps the true power of this constraint is internal. Yeah, by stripping away our own mental clutter, by forcing our sprawling, overwhelming, often terrifying dreams into basic, manageable structures like I want to and because, it forces us to clarify what we actually desire.
Wow.
So I leave you with this to ponder. If speaking our goals aloud in the simplest terms possible is what finally brings us the confidence to share them, could it be that the very act of simplifying our ambitions is exactly what makes them achievable? So, imagine for a second that your smartphone is running on like 1% battery.
Oh, the worst feeling. Total panic mode.
Right. The screen is dimming, apps are crashing left and right, and you've got that little red battery icon just flashing at you.
Begging for a charger.
Exactly. Begging for a wall outlet. But instead of plugging it in to recharge, you decide to, turn on your personal hotspot.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you turn it on so 5 of your friends can connect their devices and stream movies off your dying phone.
That is just, structurally, that's insane. Your phone would just die in 3 seconds.
Totally insane for a piece of technology, right? But the crazy thing is, It's exactly how millions of us are running our own lives every single day.
It really is. It's the ultimate modern trap, honestly.
Yeah.
We are so obsessed with optimizing everything around us, like our workflows, our schedules, our team's productivity, but we just completely neglect our own basic operational capacity.
We treat ourselves like machines.
Worse than machines, actually. We treat our own energy as if it's this infinite resource, right up until the system just totally crashes.
Which brings us perfectly to the core mission of our deep dive today.
Yes.
We are looking at a really powerful narrative sourced from The Empty Cup, a journey to self-love. And, I'm sure you listening have probably heard the phrase, you can't pour from an empty cup a million times.
Oh, yeah. It's everywhere.
Right.
Yeah.
It's the kind of thing you see embroidered on throw pillows or, posted on social media with the sunset in the background.
Definitely a bumper sticker cliche at this point.
Exactly. But today, we are moving way past the cliche. We want to look at the actual mechanics of why we do this.
The psychology behind it.
Yes, like why are we so incredibly generous and patient and kind to literally everyone else while completely starving ourselves of that exact same grace?
It's a huge paradox. And, the story anchors this whole exploration around a character named Lila.
Right, Lila.
And she is essentially the poster child for this very specific kind of burnout.
She really is.
What's so compelling about Lila's situation is how well it mirrors a phenomenon we see everywhere, especially in, high-achieving, empathetic people.
One's holding it all together.
Exactly. There is this massive, really dangerous canyon between how they're perceived externally and how they are actually functioning internally.
Right.
Like, on the outside, Lila is the structural pillar. She's the person everyone goes to because she always has the answer.
She always has time.
She always has the time and she always cares.
Yeah.
But internally, that pillar is entirely hollowed out.
Yeah, because Lila is the ultimate yes person.
Oh, 100%.
I mean, a friend calls with a crisis. Yes, I'll listen for 2 hours.
Of course.
The boss needs someone to take on a weekend project. Yes, I can absolutely handle that.
Family needs someone to organize the reunion.
Yeah.
Yes, send me the details.
Right. And what I found so striking about the source material is that it highlights how society absolutely loves a Lila.
We reward it.
We really do. We don't stage interventions for people pleasers. We promote them. We give them awards for being so, reliable and selfless.
And that societal reward system is precisely what makes the trap so insidious.
How do you mean?
Well, when you are constantly rewarded with praise and approval and career advancement for ignoring your own needs, overgiving becomes this deeply entrenched defense mechanism.
Wow, a defense mechanism.
Yeah, we frame it as kindness, right? But psychologically, people-pleasing is often about control.
Wait, really? Control?
Yeah, it's a way to control how other people perceive you. Think about it. If you are always useful, you are never disposable.
Oh, man, that is heavy.
Right. If you're always fixing other people's problems, no one can ever be mad at you. But maintaining that illusion requires you to run that 1% battery down to absolute zero.
Which sets up, honestly, one of the most relatable moments in this whole narrative.
The mirror scene.
Yes. It's nighttime. Lila has finally finished everything for everyone else. The emails are sent, the crises are managed, the house is finally quiet.
The world is asleep.
Exactly. And instead of feeling this deep satisfaction of a job well done, she catches her reflection in the bathroom mirror and just feels this crushing emptiness.
Just total exhaustion.
Yeah, and she actually asks herself out loud, why do I care about everyone, but not myself?
It's a heartbreaking moment. But it happens because the noise of helping others is a fantastic way to drown out your own internal distress.
Like a distraction.
Exactly. When the external demands finally stop for the day, the silence is deafening. You're left entirely alone with the reality of your self-abandonment.
Self-abandonment, that's a great way to put it.
The exhaustion Lila feels in that mirror moment, it isn't just the physical result of doing too many tasks. It is the profound emotional toll of actively ignoring your own existence day after day.
Because you spent, 12 hours proving to the world that everyone else matters?
Right. Which implicitly tells your own brain that you do not matter.
That is such a harsh reality to face at midnight. And, it forces Lila out of her house.
She just has to escape.
Yeah, she needs a change of scenery because the walls are literally closing in on her. So she heads out to a quiet park to just sit and think.
To finally be still.
Right. And this is where the narrative shifts from just, diagnosing the problem to actually trying to treat it.
The turning point.
Exactly. While she's sitting there alone on this bench, an older woman named Mira walks up to her.
And Mira is such a fascinating catalyst in this story
She really is.
because she doesn't approach Lila with, like, a clipboard of solutions or unsolicited advice. She simply notices Lila's distress, sits down near her, and just asks, "Are you okay?"
Just a simple question.
Yeah, and then she does something that Lila almost never experiences in her own life.
What's that?
She actually waits for the honest answer.
Wow. Yeah, she doesn't interrupt.
Not at all.
She doesn't jump in with her own story about, a time she was also tired to make it about herself. She just provides this completely neutral, non-judgmental space.
A safe container for the truth.
Yes. And because Mira creates that safety, Lila finally admits it out loud. She confesses that she is always there for others, but she feels completely empty inside.
Which is the perfect opening for Mira to deliver the central metaphor of the whole story.
The empty cup.
Right. She looks at Lila and tells her, "You can't pour from an empty cup." Now, as you mentioned earlier, we all know this phrase.
We've all seen the throw pillows.
Exactly. But Mira doesn't deliver it as this abstract philosophical musing. She delivers it as an undeniable law of physics.
A law of physics. I like that.
It is. If you have a physical pitcher of water and there is no water in it, you cannot give someone a drink. Your desire to give them a drink is completely irrelevant.
Your moral character is irrelevant.
Exactly. You just lack the resources, period.
Okay, but I want to stop right here because I feel like I need to push back a little on behalf of the listener.
Yeah, go for it.
If you are someone who operates like Lila, a chronic overgiver, understanding the physics of the cup isn't the actual problem.
No, it's not the intellect that's the issue.
Right. The problem is the guilt. Like, if I'm used to being the savior at work and the therapist for my friends, and suddenly you tell me to stop pouring and focus on my own cup,
It feels wrong.
it feels incredibly selfish. How does someone get past that visceral panic that taking care of themselves suddenly makes them a bad person?
Oh, that is the exact mental hurdle we have to dismantle. And it requires a complete paradigm shift.
How so?
Well, we have to understand the evolutionary biology at play here. As humans, we evolved in tribes.
Yeah, hunter-gatherer stuff.
Exactly. And our survival depended entirely on being accepted by the group.
Sure.
So for a chronic people pleaser, saying no triggers a primal fear of rejection.
Oh, wow. So it's literally life or death to the brain.
Yes. The nervous system interprets setting a boundary as an actual threat to your survival. You subconsciously think, if I stop being useful, they will cast me out.
So the panic is real. It's a biological alarm bell going off.
Precisely. But we have to counter that biological panic with logic. And this is exactly what Mira does for Lila in the park.
She gives her a new framework.
Right. She reclassifies self-care. She takes it out of the category of selfish indulgence and moves it firmly into the category of necessary prerequisite.
Necessary prerequisite.
Yeah. Selfishness is taking more than your fair share of resources while others go without. Self-preservation is ensuring you have enough structural integrity to continue existing.
Like the airplane oxygen mask rule.
Exactly. If you don't secure your own oxygen mask first, you pass out. And then you're just another casualty that someone else has to save.
I really like that distinction. Selfishness is taking more than your share. Self-preservation is maintaining your structural integrity.
It changes everything when you view it that way.
It does. So Lila has this huge breakthrough in the park. She realizes the cup is empty, and the physics simply won't allow her to keep operating this way.
The realization is the first step.
Right. But knowing you need to fill the cup and actually doing it are two entirely different universes. So how does she actually start?
The story outlines a very specific 5-part blueprint that Mira shares with Lila.
Okay, let's hear the blueprint.
And what's brilliant about it is that it tackles both the external behaviors and the internal cognitive loops at the exact same time.
Let's break these down, because they sound deceptively simple, Mira tells her. Learn to say no. Take time for yourself. Speak to yourself kindly. Stop trying to please everyone. And remember your worth.
Deceptively simple is the perfect way to phrase it.
Right, because if I'm reading that list, my immediate reaction is, sure, I'll just get right on that piece of cake.
As if it's a grocery list.
Yeah. But practically speaking, how does someone who has spent 20 years saying yes just suddenly learn to say no? It's like asking someone to use a muscle that has completely atrophied.
It's exactly like an atrophied muscle.
Yeah.
And, using it for the first time is going to cause cramps, shaking, and pain.
It's going to hurt.
Yeah. And the story doesn't shy away from this at all. The very next day at work, someone approaches Lila with extra tasks, which is her usual trigger to say yes.
For default mode.
Right. But she pauses. And instead she says, "I'm sorry, I can't today."
Wow. Huge step.
It is. But the narrative points out that this moment feels incredibly uncomfortable for her. And we really need to unpack why that discomfort is actually the goal.
Wait, the discomfort is the goal. Usually when something feels awful, our brain tells us we're making a huge mistake.
Right. But in this specific case, the discomfort is the friction of unwiring a deeply ingrained neural pathway.
Breaking the habit.
Exactly. Lila's brain is used to getting a dopamine hit every single time she pleases someone, combined with the relief of avoiding their potential disappointment.
So she's addicted to the approval.
Yes. When she says no, she cuts off that dopamine supply completely, and she forces herself to sit with the anxiety of potential disapproval.
That sounds miserable.
It is, but that discomfort means she is actively resisting the compulsion. It's the psychological equivalent of a withdrawal symptom.
That makes so much sense. It feels awful because you're literally withdrawing from the drug of external validation.
Exactly.
And the story captures that duality perfectly. It says the moment feels uncomfortable, but it also feels freeing.
Freedom is on the other side of that anxiety.
Right, because she survives the encounter, the world didn't end, she didn't get fired on the spot, and she actually protected an hour of her own time.
And that small victory builds the foundation for the second part of Mira's blueprint.
Which is taking time for yourself.
Right. Once you've carved out the time by saying no, you actually have to inhabit that time.
Which brings us to, honestly, my favorite scene in the entire narrative.
The walk.
Yes. Lila decides to go for a walk, just for herself. But she does something incredibly radical.
She leaves the phone behind.
She leaves her phone at home. No podcasts, no music, no group chats, no work emails. Just her in the park.
It's a bold move in today's world.
Right. I think for a lot of people listening right now, leaving the house without a phone sounds way more stressful than actually bringing it.
Oh, absolutely.
The phone is essentially a portal to endless demands. It's like an umbilical cord to everyone else's emergencies.
That's a great analogy. And by leaving the phone behind, she is enforcing the physical boundary that she just created verbally at work.
So she's backing up her no with action.
Exactly. But let's look at the physiological response here because it's fascinating. The story notes that at first, the quiet feels strange and really unsettling to her.
The withdrawal again.
Yes. Again, we are dealing with brain chemistry. Our phones condition us to be in a constant state of hypervigilance.
Waiting for the next ping.
Right. A ping could be a crisis you have to fix, or it can be praise. Both of those spike your cortisol and your dopamine levels.
So your brain is just constantly redlining.
Yep. So when you remove the device entirely, your brain is still actively scanning the environment for those inputs. The silence literally feels like a dangerous void.
So you're out there walking and your brain is just screaming, check the email. What if someone needs you? What if there's a fire you need to put out?
Exactly. You are experiencing the raw reality of your own company without any distractions to numb you out.
Which is terrifying for a lot of us.
It is. But the narrative shows us that if you can just endure that initial spike of anxiety, the nervous system eventually catches up. It realizes there is no actual tiger chasing you.
The threat isn't real.
Right. The cortisol drops.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when the text tells us Lila slowly begins to feel peaceful. The frantic energy dissipates, and she actually hears her own thoughts for the first time in months.
It's a gradual shift from total panic to actual presence.
A beautiful transition.
And I really appreciate how the narrative emphasizes that it's a slow process. It's not magic.
No, it takes time.
Yeah, as the days pass, she starts making these small incremental changes. She actually rests when her body says it's tired, rather than just pushing through with another cup of coffee.
Listening to her body.
Right. She listens to her own feelings instead of automatically adopting the mood of whoever she happens to be talking to. But here is the crucial detail that makes this story so incredibly authentic.
She still feels guilty.
Yes, she still feels guilty sometimes.
And that is the most realistic part of the entire journey. Taking care of yourself does not magically erase decades of conditioning overnight.
It's so deeply wired in.
It is.
Yeah.
But we have to reframe what guilt means here. Guilt is not a sign that you are doing something wrong.
It isn't.
No. In this context, guilt is just an emotional echo. It's a ghost in the machine.
A ghost in the machine. Wow.
Think of it like an old operating system firing an error code simply because you are no longer following its outdated programming.
So when the guilt flares up, you don't panic and revert back to your old people-pleasing ways. You just look at the guilt, acknowledge it, and let it pass.
Precisely. You recognize the guilt as an emotion, not a fact. And the story gives Lila a really practical tool to counter that emotional echo.
Mira's words.
Exactly. When the guilt of saying no or taking a nap threatens to overwhelm her, she remembers Mira's words. You can't pour from an empty cup.
Using the metaphor as a shield.
The logical necessity of self-preservation acts as a literal firewall against the irrational guilt of not being everything to everyone.
She uses the logic to parent her own anxiety. I love that.
It's very empowering.
It is. Which transitions us perfectly into the internal cognitive side of Mira's blueprint, because the external stuff is saying no and, putting the phone away.
A boundary setting.
Right. But the internal work is about speaking to yourself kindly and remembering your worth.
The hardest part for most people.
Without a doubt. If you spend your whole life validating everyone else, your inner critic is usually incredibly vicious.
Oh, absolutely brutal.
You would never say the things you think about yourself to a friend.
Never. That cognitive dissonance is just staggering. We will offer endless grace, patience, and understanding to a coworker who makes a mistake.
Oh, don't worry about it. It's fine.
Right.
Right.
But if we drop a glass in our own kitchen, our internal monologue immediately goes to, you're so stupid, you're so clumsy, you're a complete failure.
It goes 0 to 60 in half a second.
It does. And changing that internal monologue is really the final frontier of filling your cup. You have to start actively challenging that harsh voice.
Talking back to it.
Yes. When it says you're selfish for taking a break, you have to consciously reply, no, I am resting because my body requires it, and I am worthy of rest.
It's actively rewiring the narrative in real time.
Exactly.
And that brings us beautifully to the climax of the story, which acts as this incredible bookend to the very beginning of Lila's journey.
The second mirror scene.
Yes. We find Lila back in her house at night, standing in front of the exact same bathroom mirror again.
But think about the contrast here.
It's night and day.
The first time she was at that mirror, she was completely depleted. She was confronting a void, realizing she had abandoned herself.
Running on empty.
Right. The second time, the physical environment is exactly the same, but her internal landscape has completely shifted. She looks at her reflection, and she smiles.
She smiles. But, the narrative makes sure to clarify exactly why she is smiling.
It's a very important distinction.
Yeah. It's not because she got a promotion or because everyone is suddenly perfectly happy with her or because her life is magically free of conflict.
She smiles because she is finally taking care of herself.
Yes.
She is looking at someone who she has decided is worth protecting.
I love that phrase, worth protecting.
And the really profound takeaway from this moment is that self-love and recovery from deep burnout, they don't require this dramatic, cinematic life overhaul.
You don't have to flee the country.
Right. You don't have to quit your job, sell all your belongings, and move into a cabin in the woods to find peace.
Although that does sound nice sometimes.
Sure, it's tempting, but it's not realistic.
No. It's not about escaping your life. It's about changing how you operate within it. It's just small choices. Every single day.
Incremental changes.
Yeah, and I love that framework because it takes so much of the overwhelming pressure off. You don't have to fix everything at once.
Can't fix everything at once.
Right. You just have to say, I can't take that on right now on a random Tuesday afternoon. You just have to leave your phone in the other room for 30 minutes on a Thursday.
Small boundaries.
You just have to drink a glass of water and go to bed early when you're exhausted. They are these tiny micro moments of self-advocacy.
And those micro moments are subject to compounding interest.
Oh, that's a great way to put it. Compounding interest.
Every time you set a boundary, you add a drop to the cup. Every time you speak kindly to yourself instead of berating yourself, you add a drop.
It adds up over time.
It does. Over weeks and months, you rebuild your internal reserves. And the beautiful irony of this entire process is that by focusing on yourself, you actually become better equipped to handle the world.
Because you actually have the energy now.
Exactly. When you finally do choose to help someone else, it comes from a place of genuine abundance and capacity, rather than a place of resentful depletion.
You're pouring from the overflow, not scraping the dusty bottom of the pitcher.
Perfectly said.
So what does this all mean for you listening right now? Let's pull all of this together.
Let's do it.
Lila's journey in the empty cup isn't just a sweet little fable. It's a highly practical diagnostic tool for your own life. We started this deep dive asking why we are so kind to others but not ourselves.
The core paradox.
Right. And we've seen that it's driven by a societal conditioning that falsely equates self-sacrifice with worthiness. And, of course, an evolutionary fear of being rejected if we aren't constantly useful to the tribe.
But the reality is that True resilience, the kind that allows you to be genuinely supportive of your family, your friends, and your colleagues over the long haul, it demands that you acknowledge your own human limits.
You're not a machine.
You're not. You have to endure the temporary discomfort of setting boundaries to achieve the long-term freedom of a balanced life.
It really all comes back to treating yourself like a piece of high-value machinery that requires regular maintenance rather than just a disposable battery.
Exactly.
The story leaves us with a challenge, and I think it is the absolute perfect way to wrap up our time together today.
It really asks a question that requires total, brutal honesty.
Yes, it does.
We want you to take a quiet moment today, maybe when you're driving or washing the dishes or just sitting on your couch, and ask yourself, do I treat myself with the exact same kindness, patience, and respect that I freely give to the people I love?
That is the ultimate litmus test right there. Think about the tone of voice you use when your best friend is going through a really hard time.
The gentleness.
Think about the grace you extend to them. And then hold that up against the way you speak to yourself in your own head when you mess up.
The contrast is usually pretty shocking.
It is. If the answer to that question is no, if there is a massive gap between the empathy you output to the world and the empathy you internalize, then today is the exact right day to start making those small, uncomfortable, but incredibly freeing choices.
Start filling the cup.
Exactly. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Take care of yourself out there. And remember, when the noise stops tonight and you catch your own reflection, make sure you're looking at someone who is finally off the back burner. So, imagine trying to empty the ocean with a teaspoon.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that sounds completely exhausting.
Right. But that is exactly what it feels like when you look around and realize you desperately need an entire life overhaul. You know, you can barely find the energy to get off the couch.
Absolutely. The sheer scale of it is just paralyzing.
Exactly. We have all been there. You want to completely reinvent yourself, but just thinking about it is too much. So, welcome to today's deep dive where we're going to tackle exactly that.
And we're using a really fascinating text for this, right?
Yes. We are extracting the core insights from this excerpt called Small Habits, the Architecture of Big Change. And specifically, we're diving into a story inside it titled Healthy Habits to Change Your Life.
It's a great piece.
It really is. Our mission today is to understand why the secret to a massive transformation does not start with, throwing out all your junk food or buying a $1,200 treadmill.
Right, which is what everyone always tries to do.
Right. Instead, it starts with something as shockingly mundane as a single glass of water.
I mean, that premise sounds almost offensively simple.
It really does.
But that is the exact mechanism we need to unpack today, because we are looking at how human beings actually alter their trajectories, as opposed to how we, daydream about altering them.
Right. The daydream is easy.
Exactly. And the gap between daydreaming about a new life and actually living it is, well, it's where most people get trapped.
So true. And our source material gives us this really vivid case study to show that gap. It's centered on two friends. First, we have this guy, Ryan.
Ah, yes. Poor Ryan.
Yeah, Ryan is profoundly stuck. He is the complete embodiment of that ocean and teaspoon feeling. And then we have his friend Noah, who basically holds the blueprint for breaking free.
But before we can even look at Noah's solution,
Yes.
we really have to examine the anatomy of Ryan's problem.
We have to understand the gravity of feeling that stuck.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because the text gives us this granular look at Ryan's daily reality, and it is just a landscape of high-friction, low-reward behaviors.
Oh, completely. It's brutal.
He stays up incredibly late staring at his phone. He relies entirely on fast food. He does absolutely no exercise.
Which just compounds, right?
Right. The compounding result is a chronic baseline state of exhaustion. I mean, he wakes up tired, he goes to bed tired.
And the mental toll of that physical exhaustion is the real trap here. The text highlights this recurring internal monologue Ryan has. He constantly thinks, I want to change my life, but I don't know how.
Which is the absolute definition of paralysis by analysis.
Yeah. It's like, okay, think of it this way. It's like someone who has never even jogged around the block deciding they're going to run a marathon tomorrow.
Oh, that's a perfect analogy.
Right. You're basically standing at the bottom of Mount Everest in flip-flops. If you're sitting on the couch, completely drained from eating heavily processed food and burning your retinas on a screen until 2 in the morning.
The phrase "change my life" is just too heavy.
Exactly. The sheer weight of that practically guarantees failure before you even start. You can't lift it.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture of behavioral psychology, we can see why Ryan's situation is essentially an inescapable prison of his own making.
A prison he built himself.
Right. because a routine that generates low energy creates this completely closed feedback loop. You consume poor fuel, you get terrible sleep, and that results in zero physiological energy.
And zero energy basically destroys your motivation.
Completely. Without motivation, your brain just seeks out the easiest, lowest friction dopamine hits available.
Which naturally leads right back to doom scrolling on the phone and grabbing the nearest fast food.
Exactly. The trap reinforces its own walls every single day.
So the source illuminates this brilliantly by contrasting Ryan with his friend Noah, because Noah operates in a completely different paradigm.
He really does. The text describes Noah as energized, calm, balanced, and focused.
The glossy after picture.
Right. And the cognitive dissonance for Ryan is just staring at Noah, seeing that picture, and then looking at his own messy before reality.
That gap between his exhausting daily grind and his grand desire to magically become Noah, that's exactly where the paralysis lives.
Because you cannot jump across a canyon in one leap.
No, you look at the gap, realize your legs aren't strong enough, and you just, sit back down on the couch.
Yeah, you give up before you jump.
So we clearly need a fundamentally different approach to break that feedback loop. Which brings us to the intervention Noah introduces to Ryan. I like to call it the Noah principle.
I love that. And it happens when Ryan finally hits his breaking point and asks Noah how he manages to stay so healthy and productive.
Noah basically delivers the thesis of this entire text.
He does. He tells Ryan, it's not about big changes. It's about small habits.
He just strips away the grandiosity of life change immediately.
He lists out these incredibly boring pedestrian actions. Wake up at the same time, drink water in the morning, move your body, eat simple food, sleep earlier.
But here is where it gets really interesting, because Noah drops this golden rule on Ryan. He says, don't change everything at once. Start with one habit.
That singular instruction is the absolute crux of the entire philosophy. Start with one habit.
Okay, I have to pause here because my initial reaction to reading this was pure skepticism.
Oh, really? Why is that?
Because think about it. If you are surviving on 3 hours of sleep and drive-through burgers, a single glass of water in the morning feels like trying to put out a forest fire with a squirt gun.
That is a very fair point.
Right. It feels entirely disproportionate to the scale of the problem. If Ryan is desperate for change, isn't this approach painfully, agonizingly slow?
It definitely feels that way. But it feels that way because we habitually mistake the action for the goal.
Wait, what do you mean?
Well, we look at the physical properties of the water and think, hydration isn't going to fix chronic fatigue and a terrible diet.
Right, water isn't magic.
Exactly. But the physical water isn't actually what is fixing Ryan's life.
Oh, so it is a psychological Trojan horse.
Yes, that's exactly it.
By setting the bar at something as trivial as drink a glass of water, the barrier to entry is lowered to the floor. You literally cannot fail.
Right. You aren't just hydrating your cells. You are establishing a new baseline of trust with yourself.
You're bypassing the brain's defense mechanisms entirely.
Which is why the source explicitly warns us later on, you don't need a perfect plan.
Which is so hard for people to accept.
It really is, but it's a vital psychological insight. Because the perfection of the plan is the ultimate enemy of the action.
Oh, absolutely.
When you demand a flawless, comprehensive life overhaul blueprint, you are setting a standard so high that failure is just inevitable.
And failing at that massive plan just reinforces the low energy, low self-esteem feedback loop we discussed earlier. You just feel worse.
Exactly. But by just drinking the water, Ryan is proving to his own brain that he's capable of keeping a promise.
He is sneaking past the paralysis.
Noah is basically telling him to ignore the massive mountain he wants to climb and just focus on picking up the one tiny pebble sitting next to his shoe.
The anxiety of the massive overhaul vanishes when the only requirement for success is holding a glass under a faucet for 3 seconds.
It's brilliant in its simplicity.
It is. But we have this elegant theory now, but the source text doesn't let us stay in the theoretical realm.
No, it grounds us in reality.
Right. It forces us to look at the messy reality of implementation. The conversation with Noah is inspiring, but what actually happens when Ryan wakes up the next morning?
The timeline of Ryan's execution here is critical.
Yeah.
Because it explicitly demonstrates that this is not an overnight transformation.
Not at all. On days 1 and 2, Ryan just drinks the water. That is the entire scope of his life change.
It's almost laughably anticlimactic.
It really is. But because it is so easy, he succeeds. And then, feeling a tiny bit of momentum, he decides to escalate.
He adds a short walk. Just 10 minutes.
And this specific phase of the narrative is where the true battle happens.
Yeah, the text leans heavily into the friction.
Oh.
Ryan experiences the exact moment he introduces that 10-minute walk.
The resistance is visceral. I mean, the text notes that at first it feels incredibly difficult. He feels lazy. He actively wants to stop and just turn around.
His brain is fighting him.
Yes. It is the perfect real-world example of trying to force a software update on an old, sluggish computer.
Oh, I love that comparison.
Right. You try to install this new operating system, which is the 10-minute walk, and the tired, bloated system that is Ryan's body immediately starts throwing critical error messages.
We cannot compute. Resources too low.
Feel too lazy. Abort mission. The system violently rejects the update.
Because the biological system is desperately trying to revert to its familiar state. Even though Ryan's baseline state of exhaustion and poor health is miserable, it's predictable.
And the brain loves predictability.
It really does, because predictability requires zero extra energy to maintain. The 10-minute walk threatens that homeostasis of misery.
So how does he force the update to install despite the error messages? Because he doesn't suddenly summon a miraculous well of inspiration.
No, he doesn't watch a motivational video or anything.
He relies on Noah's mantra. He repeats to himself over and over, small habits every day.
He leverages the mechanics of the mantra to override his total lack of motivation.
And even after a full week of fighting this daily battle, the text is brutally honest. It notes he only feels, quote, a little more awake.
Which is such an important detail. It raises this vital question about how we view the mechanics of change.
It states a profound truth. You don't need motivation every day.
Because we culturally treat motivation as the absolute prerequisite fuel for taking action. If you don't feel motivated, you can't do the thing.
Right, which is just false.
Exactly. If we analyze the friction Ryan is experiencing on that walk, we expose the fundamental flaw in that cultural belief. Motivation is simply the emotional spark that makes you want to change your life when you were sitting in a coffee shop talking to Noah.
It gets you to agree to the concept of the water. It gets you to set the alarm.
But as Ryan discovers halfway down the block when his legs feel heavy and his brain is screaming at him to go back to the couch, motivation evaporates.
It is an incredibly unreliable emotion.
It really is. What carries him through those inevitable moments of deep laziness is not motivation. It's the structural integrity of the daily habit.
The habit serves as a sturdy bridge over the days when the motivation river completely dries up.
He leans on the architecture rather than the emotion. You don't have to want to do the walk.
You just do the walk because it is mathematically the next step in the sequence. That completely removes the emotional burden of feeling like it.
And pushing through that initial software rejection is really the crucible of this entire process.
It's the hardest part.
Yeah, surviving this system crashing every morning is difficult, but establishing that baseline is what unlocks the next phase of the text's thesis.
But surviving that daily system crash is only half the battle. Because once you establish that baseline, the source shifts focus to what happens when these isolated habits start colliding with each other.
Right, we move into the compounding effect.
We get to watch the snowball begin to roll down the hill.
Which is the best part. We enter week 2 of Ryan's timeline.
And the text outlines how he begins to stack another habit on top of the foundation. He starts slipping a little earlier.
Slowly, his entire biological rhythm begins to shift. He is hydrating. He is moving daily. He is getting actual rest.
And because of that, he naturally starts reaching for simpler, healthier food. And the text makes a brilliantly deliberate point here. It notes that his diet is not perfect, but better.
There is the explicit rejection of the perfect plan echoing again.
Yes. The perfection is no longer the goal. The trajectory is the goal.
And the source describes the pace of this compounding process so accurately. It says, not fast, but steadily.
It is exactly like an investment portfolio for your biology.
That's a great way to think about it.
The early deposits, the glass of water, the 10-minute walk, they're incredibly small and honestly intensely boring.
Very boring.
You check your balance after week 1, and you've only earned a fraction of a cent in extra energy. You feel a little more awake.
But as those habits start earning interest on top of each other, the compound growth at the end of the timeline is massive.
Exactly. Weeks pass in the narrative, and we see the results of that compound interest. Ryan fundamentally feels like a different organism.
He has a reservoir of energy. He has mental focus.
And when he finally runs into Noah again, he validates the entire experiment. He tells him, you were right. It's not about big changes. It's about small habits.
But the physical transformation is great. But the text includes one specific psychological detail that is arguably the most important sentence in the entire story.
Oh, I know the one you mean.
It says, and most importantly, he feels proud of himself.
Mm-hmm.
That is a massive paradigm shift.
It really is. What stands out to you about that specific shift to pride?
I think it changes his core identity. Ryan's biggest victory wasn't unlocking more physical energy or finally eating a vegetable.
Right.
It was the quiet, internal realization that he possessed the capability to keep a promise to himself.
Yeah, the pride didn't stem from a dramatic overnight success story that you'd, brag about on social media.
Exactly. It came from the unglamorous, gritty maintenance of a very boring daily effort.
He proved to himself that he is no longer a person who doesn't know how to change.
And synthesizing this back to the broader theme of the source material reveals why the book uses the word architecture in the title.
Because by refusing to change everything at once, Ryan built a sustainable, load-bearing foundation.
He didn't just rent a new lifestyle for a few weeks. He constructed a new baseline for his identity.
He didn't try to order a fully built, customized mansion and then panic when it didn't fit through his front door.
Right. He just poured the concrete, and then he laid one piece of wood.
And the pride is derived from the agency of that building process.
The text actually concludes the narrative with a moment of reflection where Ryan sits quietly and contemplates his journey.
And his ultimate realization is that he didn't actually change his entire life.
No, he simply started one tiny thing. And the momentum of that one tiny thing altered the entire trajectory of his existence.
So what does this all mean for you, the person listening right now?
It's the million-dollar question.
Let's distill the ultimate takeaway from this architecture of change.
Right.
We have learned today that massive, life-altering transformations do not require flawless, exhaustive blueprints.
They absolutely do not.
They do not require you to wake up vibrating with boundless motivation every single day.
No, the architecture of a new life does not begin with the explosive demolition of your current one.
It requires nothing more than small, wildly simple actions executed with stubborn repetition.
You overcome the initial laziness, not by digging deep for more motivation, but by submitting to the simplicity of the habit itself.
You trust the math of compounding return.
You just trust the math.
So we want to leave you with the exact question that the source text poses to the reader at the very end of the story.
What is one small habit you can start today?
Not a total dietary overhaul, not a rigid workout regimen, just one tiny, almost embarrassing to admit how small habit. Pick it. Do it today.
Because the objective isn't to fix your life by tomorrow morning. The objective is simply to prove to your own brain that you are capable of taking the first step.
We normally view life change as this grand, dramatic, binary switch, but we have seen how Ryan's entire universe, his energy, his mental clarity, his profound sense of self-respect, was ultimately unlocked by a totally unremarkable glass of water on a random morning.
It's pretty amazing when you step back and look at it.
Which leaves you with something highly provocative to ponder as you go about your day. If that is true, what massive, unimaginable life transformations are currently hiding right now in the mundane 5-second choices you are going to make tomorrow morning?
That is a staggering thought to carry forward, because the future is built in those 5-second windows.
It really is. Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Find your glass of water, trust the math, and we will see you next time. When you drop a physical object, say, like your favorite coffee mug on a hard tile floor.
Oh, the worst.
Right. But the physics of that event are completely immediate. I mean, it hits, it shatters, it's broken, it's done.
Yeah, it's undeniable.
Exactly. Your brain processes the sound, the visual, and it instantly categorizes the event like, okay, mug is gone. You grab a broom and you move on.
It's immediate, and more importantly, it's concrete.
Mm-hmm.
The reality of the loss is totally binary.
Right.
You don't stand there for 3 weeks staring at the shards, wondering if the mug is secretly still intact, or if there's some parallel universe where you didn't drop it.
Exactly. But when you drop a dream, or when a major life opportunity suddenly shatters, that breakage happens in this agonizing, invisible slow motion.
Yeah.
The pieces don't sweep up neatly. They stay suspended in your mind. You wake up thinking about them, and they're constantly demanding your attention, basically forcing your brain to replay the drop over and over again.
Psychologists actually refer to this as a form of ambiguous loss.
Ambiguous loss.
Yeah. We are biologically wired to crave the certainty of the broken mug. But an emotional loss or uh, a sudden professional derailment, it leaves us in incredibly murky territory.
Because you can't see the pieces.
Exactly. There is no physical evidence of the shattered dream, so the brain just keeps searching for it.
And that murky territory is exactly what we're exploring today. Welcome to the deep dive.
Glad to be here.
I want you, listening right now, to think about a time you lost something truly important. Maybe it was a career opportunity you banked your entire future on.
Or a personal goal you worked tirelessly for.
Yeah, and you just felt completely stuck, paralyzed. This deep dive is about the exact anatomy of that feeling, and more importantly, the specific mechanisms of what happens next.
The recovery phase.
Right. We are drawing from an amazing narrative source called The Redirection of Loss, a journey through change, and looking specifically at a story inside it titled, Everything Happens for a Reason.
Which is a heavy title, but we'll get into that.
We will. But we aren't just reading a fable today. Our mission is to extract the actual psychology of loss, how we process sudden changes, and the frankly surprising tools we use to navigate from total disappointment to genuine growth. Okay, let's unpack this.
Well, to really understand that journey, we have to look closely at the mechanics of the mind under extreme stress.
Okay.
When a major loss hits, our initial reaction is almost entirely driven by the brain's threat detection center.
Yeah.
Basically, logic goes straight out the window.
We actually see this perfectly illustrated through the protagonist of our source material, Ethan. He loses a massive opportunity.
And it's not just a casual setback, right?
No, not at all. It's something he poured his absolute soul into. He believed in it, he worked relentlessly for it, and then literally overnight, it just evaporates.
Yeah.
So he's hit with this tidal wave of disappointment, confusion, and frustration. But what caught my eye isn't just that he's sad. It's the specific cognitive trap he falls into.
The looping.
Yes. He starts looping on two specific questions. Why did this happen to me, and what did I do wrong?
Which is, it's the brain trying to solve an unsolvable equation.
Right. And when I was looking at Ethan's reaction, my first thought wasn't that he was failing, but that his brain was treating the lost opportunity like a literal predator it needed to analyze.
Oh, that's a really interesting way to frame it.
Like he's trying to figure out how the tiger got into the house so it doesn't happen again.
That's a great way to look at it. Evolutionarily, we are meaning-making machines. If something bad happens, the brain demands a causal link to prevent future harm.
Makes sense.
The problem is that questions like, why me, and what did I do wrong, force your brain search engine to look exclusively backward.
Right.
You're demanding an explanation from the past. And when you do that, you enter a state of total rumination. Days pass, and Ethan stays completely frozen because his mental energy is entirely consumed by analyzing a ghost.
He's analyzing what could have been. But I have to push back on this a little bit.
Go for it.
I mean, I sort of see it like he's staring at a locked door while holding a massive ring of keys, but he's so busy asking why the door is locked that he doesn't even try to put a new key in the lock.
Exactly.
But is this initial period of getting stuck and looking backward fundamentally a failure of perspective? Because to me, it feels like an inevitable, necessary part of the human grieving process.
Right.
You can't just lose something huge and immediately pivot to, well, time to move on. Shouldn't we expect him to loop a bit?
This raises an important question. And you are completely right that the initial shock and the desire for an explanation are unavoidable.
Okay.
Grieving the loss of a future you imagine is incredibly healthy. But the stagnation, the part where days turn into weeks of being frozen, that happens when we allow a temporary emotional reflex to harden into a permanent mental posture.
Ah, I see.
Ethan isn't failing by asking why, but he is getting trapped because he lacks the catalyst to interrupt that specific neurological loop.
And his catalyst arrives in a very unassuming way. Ethan goes to a quiet park in the evening, still entirely trapped in this mental loop, just trying to escape his own head.
Yeah.
He sits down and he meets an older man named David.
The mechanics of their interaction here are just brilliant, particularly in how they model emotional co-regulation.
How so?
Well, David notices Ethan's distress and gently asks if he's okay.
And Ethan just spills everything. I mean, he unloads the loss, the confusion, the fear.
Right.
But here's what fascinated me. David doesn't interrupt. He doesn't offer a quick fix. He just listens in total silence.
Yes.
I was thinking about why that specific detail matters so much, because if I'm pouring my heart out and someone tries to instantly silver lining my pain, I get defensive.
Totally.
I feel like they're just trying to shut me up. David's silence felt like a physiological reset for Ethan.
You've hit on something crucial there. When someone tries to fix your grief with immediate advice, your amygdala, the brain's alarm system, it often interprets that as a dismissal of the threat.
Oh.
Yeah, it actually makes you double down on the pain to prove it's real. By offering profound silence, David provides a safe container. He is validating the pain without reinforcing the panic.
That makes so much sense.
That silence allows Ethan's nervous system to finally downregulate. And it's only after that foundation is set that David offers his perspective.
And that perspective is the core pivot of this whole narrative. David tells him, sometimes we don't understand things when they happen, but later we see the reason.
Right.
And then he says, not everything that feels like a loss is a loss. Sometimes it's a redirection.
It's a complete cognitive reframe.
Yeah.
It takes the concept of a loss, which the brain views as a permanent deficit, like a black hole, and turns it into a vector, a change in trajectory.
Okay, but let's be totally honest here.
Yeah.
When you are deeply hurting, hearing everything happens for a reason or it's just a redirection can sound like toxic positivity.
Oh, absolutely.
It sounds like a cheap cliche you'd read on a throw pillow in a waiting room. Ethan even feels that way at first. He pushes back and literally says, I don't see any reason. This just feels like a mistake.
Right.
So if it sounds like a cliche, how does this actually break through Ethan's grief here? Why doesn't he just roll his eyes and walk away?
Because context is everything. David didn't lead with the cliche. He led with empathy and silence.
Right, the container.
Exactly. But more fundamentally, David isn't deploying toxic positivity. Toxic positivity says, don't be sad, look on the bright side.
Yeah, which is infuriating.
Right. David is saying, this hurts and that hurt has a function. He suggests that difficult moments exist to push us to change.
Okay.
He is reframing the pain, not as a punishment from the universe, but as the necessary friction required to move you off a path you were no longer meant to be on.
Friction required to move. I like that a lot. It's almost like a rocket needing resistance to launch.
That's a great analogy.
And it actually works for Ethan. He goes home feeling calmer, not magically healed, which I think is very realistic, but the panic has subsided enough for him to take a tiny, small action.
Yes.
And here's where the source material takes a wildly unexpected turn.
It gets incredibly specific about the tools he uses to rebuild his momentum,
Yeah.
and they are not what you would expect at all.
Right, because he decides to read, but he doesn't grab a dense philosophical treatise on the nature of suffering. He doesn't grab a massive self-help manual either.
No, he doesn't.
He turns to beginner language learning books, specifically things like short stories in English for beginners, a book called Learn English Through Stories, 16 stories to improve your English grammar, and an audio program called Effortless English.
Yeah.
The stories are super simple, the language is basic, and he focuses on a specific mantra from the audio. Don't focus on what is perfect, focus on progress.
Which is a really profound shift from his previous mindset of demanding everything go back to normal.
But here's where it gets really interesting to me. Of all things, why do you think he turns to beginner language learning books instead of a traditional self-help manual? If I'm going through an existential crisis, I'm not picking up a book on beginner grammar.
Right. It seems counterintuitive.
Yeah. But I was trying to figure out why this works, and I realized it might be about lowering the barrier to entry. Like, if you're grieving, your brain's RAM is completely used up.
Definitely.
Reading a heavy self-help book might just cause a system crash. So is this basically a way of reducing cognitive load?
That is precisely what is happening. When you are trapped in a cycle of rumination, your cognitive load is absolutely maxed out.
You have no bandwidth left.
Exactly. Your brain is exhausted from spinning its wheels on the why me puzzle. A complex task would overwhelm him. But a beginner language book?
Yeah, why that?
The simplicity of the language tasks serves as a gentle cognitive reset. It's the mental equivalent of rebooting a computer in safe mode.
Safe mode. That makes so much sense. It strips away all the background applications that are draining the battery.
Exactly. It requires just enough focus to pull his attention away from his grief, but it's not so demanding that it triggers frustration.
Oh, that's smart.
Furthermore, the process of language learning inherently embodies that mantra of progress over perfection. You don't learn a new language flawlessly on day one.
No, you stumble all the time.
You stumble, you mispronounce a word, you try again. By engaging in this specific type of learning, Ethan is quietly rebuilding his self-efficacy.
He's proving to himself he can still do things.
Right. He's proving to his own brain that he can still learn, adapt, and move forward, even if it's just one basic vocabulary word at a time. It's a low-stakes environment for generating dopamine through small wins.
He's generating momentum without the pressure of his entire career or future hanging in the balance.
Right.
And this gentle cognitive reset, combined with the emotional grounding he got from David on the park bench, it leads to the absolute turning point of the text, the paradigm shift.
The change in the question.
Exactly. Ethan finally stops asking, why did this happen to me? And he starts asking a radically different question. What can I learn from this? And the narrative treats this as the moment everything changes.
Because it is. The questions we ask ourselves literally act as the steering wheel for our attention.
I was actually thinking about this, like changing the search parameters in a massive database.
Oh, how so?
Well, if you type, why is my life ruined, into your brain's search engine, it's going to instantly return millions of results, detailing your past failures, your insecurities, and all the things you can't control.
Right, it finds what you ask for.
But the moment you type in, "what can I learn?" the algorithm shifts entirely.
If we connect this to the bigger picture,
Mm.
what you're describing is essentially the activation of the reticular activating system, or the RAS in the brain.
Wait, the RAS?
Yeah, it's a network of neurons that filters incoming information based on what you tell it's important.
Okay.
So why did this happen to me? Steers your RAS to look for evidence of victimhood.
Oh, wow.
But what can I learn from this? Commands your RAS to scan the present environment for opportunities, resources, and actionable steps. It demands agency.
It's like changing a car from reverse into drive. You are still sitting in the exact same vehicle, but your direction of travel changes entirely.
That's a perfect analogy.
And the behavioral outcome in the story is immediate. Once his brain starts looking for actionable steps, he actually takes them. He stops staring at the locked door of his past.
Yeah, he grabs a new key.
Exactly. He starts learning new skills, exploring new avenues, trying things he's never attempted before. The heavy machinery of his life, the fact that he lost his dream opportunity, it hasn't physically changed. But his direction of travel changes completely just by shifting that internal search parameter.
It beautifully illustrates that our mindset directly dictates our behavioral output.
Yeah.
The objective reality of the lost opportunity remained constant.
Right.
But Ethan's relationship to that loss transformed. He stopped viewing it as a permanent injury and started treating it as a training ground.
That's powerful.
Because his relationship to the event changed, he changed. He became more resilient, more adaptable, and more open. The loss didn't destroy him. It served as the very anvil on which his new mindset was forged.
Which brings us to the payoff.
Yeah.
Weeks and months pass, and Ethan receives a new opportunity.
Yes, the resolution.
And the story explicitly notes that it is different from the one he lost, but it is better. He has this massive aha moment where he realizes David was right all along.
Yeah.
If he had never lost that first opportunity, he never would have been available or frankly capable enough to find this new one. The redirection makes sense.
It is the ultimate validation of the theory. The pain of the initial loss was the necessary admission price for this new superior path.
I'm going to challenge the neatness of this narrative, though.
Okay, let's hear it.
This is a very satisfying, fable-like ending. He lost Job A, he suffered, he leveled up his mindset, and the universe handed him Job B, which is objectively better. But real life rarely hands us a neatly wrapped, objectively better opportunity just because we suffered gracefully. Sometimes the new job pays less.
Yeah, that's true.
Sometimes the new path is just fundamentally harder. So even if that new opportunity wasn't visibly better on paper, wasn't his internal transformation becoming a person who can survive a shattering loss and remain open to the world? Wasn't that the actual victory?
I completely agree with your pushback. And I think pulling back the layers of the narrative supports your view entirely.
Really?
Yes. The external opportunity in the story is really just a metaphor. The ultimate lesson isn't a transactional promise that suffering equals a better paycheck.
Right.
The real better opportunity wasn't the new job. The better thing was the upgraded version of Ethan.
I love that.
It's the version of him that now knows how to regulate his emotions, how to lower his cognitive load when overwhelmed by using safe mode, and how to actively reframe a crisis into a learning opportunity. That internal upgrade is the actual redirection.
So what does this all mean? When we boil this down for you, the listener, who is sitting there right now, Maybe staring at the shards of your own dropped mug. What is the ultimate takeaway?
It all distills down to how we interpret the friction in our lives. When you are in the thick of a loss, when it's dark and you are confused, you won't understand it.
And that's okay.
And that is perfectly okay. But you have to shift your perspective from viewing life as something that happens to you, which basically makes you a passive victim of circumstance, to viewing life as something that happens for you.
Life is not happening to you, it's happening for you. That is a massive mental pivot.
It really is.
It means looking at the shattered pieces of whatever you lost and deciding to make a mosaic instead of just demanding the universe give you your unbroken mug back.
Exactly. It requires giving up the demand for the past to change and accepting the invitation to build the future using the materials you have right now.
To wrap up today's deep dive, we've explored the complex anatomy of processing sudden change. We've seen that navigating loss isn't about ignoring the pain or blindly forcing a positive spin on a terrible event.
No toxic positivity allowed.
Right. It's about recognizing the neurological trap of the why me loop. It's about finding surprisingly simple tools like the cognitive safe mode of a beginner's workbook to quiet an overwhelmed brain.
Yeah.
And ultimately, it's about changing your brain's search parameters by asking, what can I learn from this to spark that vital redirection?
It's about trusting the friction, knowing it's shaping you for whatever comes next.
Absolutely. Now, before we sign off, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over.
Okay.
We've spent a lot of time talking about how endings are actually new beginnings and how that mental shift creates real change. But think about the space between those 2 points.
The transition.
Yeah. Think about that quiet park bench where Ethan sat in total silence, just letting the reality of his situation exist without immediately trying to fix it. We spend so much of our lives trying to rush out of the uncomfortable, quiet stillness of uncertainty.
We really do.
But what if that empty space isn't just a waiting room where we suffer? What if that uncomfortable stillness is the actual necessary workshop where our future selves are built?
That's the exact space where the new search parameters are written.
Exactly. Because sometimes the shattering of the glass isn't the end of your story. It's just the alarm bell telling you the real work has finally begun. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning, keep growing, and keep looking for your own redirections.
Have you ever considered that the sheer exhaustion you feel at 5 p.m. isn't actually from the physical work you did?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, it's from the invisible chaotic battles your brain was just fighting in the background all day long. I mean, we obsessively optimize our morning routines, right? We color code our calendars.
Every endless scheduling.
Exactly. We try to meticulously control all our external actions, but we completely ignore the engine that's actually generating all that output. We just treat our minds as, passive receptors, letting the Wild West kind of run its course.
We do. And I mean, the cost of that neglect is incredibly steep. We pour so much of our energy into managing the symptoms of our lives, right? But we leave the root cause, which is our internal cognitive state, completely unmanaged.
Yeah. So for this deep dive, we've got an excerpt from a really fascinating text called The Garden of the Mind. Specifically, we're looking at a section titled How to Discipline Your Thinking.
It's a great section.
It really is. And our mission today is to map out the hidden mechanics of mental exhaustion. We want to uncover the practical framework this text lays out for actually guiding our thoughts, rather than just being helplessly dragged around by them.
Which is how most people feel, honestly.
Yeah, totally helpless.
Yeah.
So, okay, let's unpack this. I mean, where do we even begin to tackle a concept as massive as the internal state of the mind?
Well, I think we have to start by establishing exactly why this hierarchy of control matters to you, the listener. Because, if you spend your time trying to force yourself to work harder or communicate better, be more present, but your mind is fundamentally unfocused and negative, your external life will always mirror that internal chaos.
Why?
You simply cannot build a focused, intentional life on top of a distracted, unmanaged mind. Like literally everything begins with the thought.
Right. So before we can even figure out how to guide the mind, we kind of have to look at the baseline state of an unmanaged one. And the source text gives us this character named Ethan, who really represents this default state for a lot of us.
He's the perfect example.
Yeah, he has this incredibly busy mind. His thoughts just never stop. He's caught in this brutal, involuntary pendulum swing.
And that pendulum is a highly accurate way to visualize it, I think. It's an oscillation between two distinct zones of powerlessness.
Powerlessness, right. Because on the backswing, he's basically trapped in the past. He's constantly replaying interactions, agonizing over mistakes, wondering what people thought of him.
Relitigating everything.
Exactly. And then the momentum carries that pendulum violently forward into the future, and he is just consumed by anticipation and dread. Like he's terrified of projects failing or, what if things go wrong? He's never just operating in the present moment.
Never.
And the result is that Ethan is completely exhausted. I mean, he doesn't run a marathon. He's just sitting at a desk. But he is mentally depleted.
He is entirely drained. And because he doesn't understand the mechanics of his own mind, he genuinely believes he's incapable of controlling his thoughts. He views his own cognition as something that just happens to him rather than something he actually has agency over.
Yeah, reading about Ethan's fatigue, the mental image that came to me wasn't just a busy guy. Ethan's brain is like a car stuck deep in the mud with the accelerator pushed to the floorboards.
That's a great way to put it.
Right, like a massive amount of fuel is being burned, the engine is screaming, the tires are just spinning violently, but there's absolutely zero forward momentum. It's just friction, heat, and completely wasted energy.
That captures the mechanical reality of his exhaustion perfectly. I mean, he is burning energy without traveling any distance at all.
But I actually want to push back on the text premise just a bit here.
Okay, let's hear it.
Because if we look at Ethan's worries,
Yeah.
Reflecting on past mistakes so we can learn from them and trying to anticipate the future so we can prepare, isn't that just an evolutionary survival mechanism?
It is, yeah.
Like, isn't that literally how the human brain evolved to keep us safe? Why does this specifically result in such deep, paralyzing mental fatigue for him?
Well, it's a really critical distinction to make, and it comes down to the mechanics of cognitive load. So the fatigue doesn't actually stem from the act of purposeful, structured planning. It stems from the lack of intentionality.
Okay, intentionality.
Right. The text specifically notes that his mind is, quote, jumping from one idea to another. When you sit down with a notebook for 20 minutes to review a past mistake and, extract a concrete lesson, that is a highly intentional, productive use of executive function.
Right. That's actually helpful.
But when your brain suddenly forces you to relive a 5-year-old embarrassing memory while you're just standing in line for coffee or throws a worst-case scenario at you while you're trying to fall asleep, that is not intentional.
Oh, man, yeah. We've all been there.
Right. And that involuntary jumping, that constant unstructured context switching, it's highly metabolically expensive for the brain. It burns through your glucose reserves without producing any actionable output. So it's not the thinking itself that exhausts Ethan. It's the chaotic, unguided nature of his rumination.
It's like having 100 web browser tabs open at once, and music is playing from one of them, but you have no idea which one.
Yes. Perfect analogy.
So we're obsessively optimizing our output,
But
completely ignoring the engine generating it. And because Ethan feels completely trapped in that driver's seat, just spinning his wheels and fundamentally believing he cannot control his own mind, he's stuck.
Totally paralyzed.
Yeah, he needs a completely opposing framework to break out of this cycle. And that alternative is embodied by a character named Marcus.
Right, and Marcus is presented as the structural opposite of Ethan. Where Ethan is chaotic and depleted, Marcus possesses this calm, clear, and just very quiet energy.
So Ethan basically asks him how he manages to stay so grounded. And Marcus delivers what is really the central thesis of the text. He says, you don't control your life, until you learn to control your thoughts.
Which is a thesis that completely reorders the traditional hierarchy of self-improvement, if you think about it.
How so?
Well, we usually assume that if we just get our schedules organized, if we just build the right external habits, eventually our minds will calm down.
Right. Fix the outside to fix the inside.
Exactly.
Right.
But Marcus argues that the calm mind is the absolute prerequisite. And he makes this critical clarification. Discipline isn't merely about the actions you take in the physical world. Discipline is fundamentally about how you process information internally.
He tells Ethan, you don't control every thought, but you can guide them. And here's where it gets really interesting. Because that distinction between controlling and guiding, it shifts the entire physics of the mind.
It really does.
Yeah, because think about it. Trying to stop every single anxious thought from popping into your head is like trying to build a massive concrete dam to stop a rushing river. You might hold the water back for a little while through sheer willpower, right?
Sure, for a minute.
But the pressure is going to build, the concrete's going to crack, and you are eventually going to get completely flooded by an anxiety attack or just a massive wave of overthinking. It's a system destined to fail.
Always.
But guiding your thoughts, that's not building a dam. That's digging irrigation channels. You're taking the kinetic energy of that rushing water and directing it where you actually want it to go. You aren't fighting the natural flow of your brain. You're giving it a productive path.
What's fascinating here is how Marcus is redefining the very concept of discipline.
Yeah, that word has a lot of baggage.
Right. For most of us, discipline carries an enormous amount of cultural baggage. It implies, harsh restriction, punishment, gritting your teeth, forcing yourself into compliance. It's a very aggressive posture.
Yeah, like a drill sergeant in your head.
Exactly. But Marcus dismantles that. He frames mental discipline as a gentle, intentional redirection. It's not about punishing yourself for having a fearful thought. It's about gently taking the steering wheel and turning the vehicle back onto the road.
It changes discipline from a weapon into a tool. But Marcus doesn't just offer Ethan a philosophical reframe here. He actually gives him a diagnostic toolkit to implement this redirection in his daily life.
And this is where it gets really practical for the listener.
Yeah, the mechanics. So the first component Marcus introduces is simply observation. He tells Ethan to just notice his thoughts without reacting immediately. And then the second part of that is to evaluate the thought by asking one question. Is this helpful?
Which sounds simple, but...
Well, I actually have to jump in here because let's look at this practically. Say you receive an incredibly vague, ominous email from your boss at 4:59 p.m. on a Friday.
Oh, the classic Friday afternoon anxiety bomb.
Right. Your heart rate spikes, your breathing gets shallow, you're spiraling into a panic about losing your job. In that exact moment, isn't it basically biologically impossible to just casually stop and objectively ask yourself, gee, is this thought helpful?
Oh, 100%. If you attempt to leap straight to evaluating the thought while you are actively spiraling, yes, it will absolutely fail.
So what's the trick?
Well, in that moment, the prefrontal cortex, which is the logical reason part of your brain, is being entirely overridden by the amygdala, your threat detection center. This is exactly why the text sequences the mechanics the way it does. Step 1, noticing and pausing, is the mandatory biological prerequisite for step 2.
Okay. The pause is the key.
Exactly. When you're caught in that Friday afternoon email spiral, you are fused with the panic. You believe the panic is reality. The act of noticing, of intentionally pausing for even just 3 seconds and saying, I am experiencing a thought about losing my job, it creates a wedge.
It separates you from it.
Yes. It unfuses you. That pause down-regulates the amygdala just enough to bring the prefrontal cortex back online. You cannot evaluate a fire while you believe you are the fire. You have to step back and become the observer first. Only then does the question, is this helpful, have any actual mechanical power?
That makes absolute logical sense. The pause is the mechanism that allows the logic to work at all. Okay, so once you establish that gap and evaluate if the thought is actually helpful, the text moves into what we do with our attention next. The third habit Marcus teaches is focusing exclusively on what you can control.
And this is incredibly difficult because, well, the human brain's negativity bias compels us to want to solve everything.
Right, we want to fix it all.
We expend vast amounts of mental energy worrying about macroeconomic trends or what other people think of us or highly unpredictable future events. By actively routing our attention back to our immediate sphere of influence, our actions, our responses, our preparation, we start burning fuel, spinning our tires in the mud. We regain forward momentum.
Which leads directly into the physical environment, actually. The final habit in Marcus's toolkit is reducing distractions to give the mind the quiet it needs to think clearly. And this really feels like an acknowledgement that our external environment is just constantly hijacking our internal state.
It comes down to cognitive load theory again. If you are constantly bombarded by notifications, news alerts, and background noise, your brain is forced to process all of that stimuli.
Right. It takes energy.
Exactly. It consumes your working memory. You cannot effectively observe and guide your internal thoughts if your mental bandwidth is entirely maxed out just processing external distractions. Quiet isn't just some luxury. It is a mechanical requirement for cognitive guidance.
Okay, so we have these four mechanics: pause, evaluate, focus on agency, and reduce noise. And to tie this all together into a usable mental model, the text provides a very specific metaphor. Your thoughts are a garden.
It's a classic metaphor for a reason. And the fundamental rule of any garden is that if you do not actively manage what grows there, weeds will take over by default. Right, the weeds of worry, insecurity, and past regret, they do not require fertilizer. They don't require your permission. They thrive on neglect, cultivating focus, calm, and intentionality that requires the active stewardship of a gardener.
Yeah, and we see Ethan take this garden metaphor and apply the mechanics in real time. And I appreciate that the text doesn't sugarcoat this process. It isn't some miraculous overnight transformation where he suddenly achieves perfect Zen clarity.
No, not at all.
He struggles. The mental habits are incredibly difficult at first because the weeds, in his mind, have deep established root system.
He'd been growing for years.
Exactly. But he persists through practical actions. He starts writing his thoughts down to understand them. He intentionally leaves his phone in another room to manufacture quiet. He practices single tasking.
Which is huge.
Yeah. And that first detail, writing his thoughts down, directly mirrors the garden metaphor. Because when a fear is just bouncing around the echo chamber of your skull, it feels massive and undefined. But writing it down on paper is the equivalent of reaching into the soil, pulling that weed out by the roots, and holding it under a light.
That's a powerful way to look at it.
You can finally examine its structure. You can look at the paper and objectively ask, is this helpful? And more often than not, seeing the irrationality written out in ink just strips it of its power.
Because writing externalizes the internal chaos. And the timeline the text portrays here is vital for the listener to understand. Like you said, Ethan doesn't write in a journal once and magically fix his brain. The text notes that days pass, then weeks.
It takes time.
Right. Slowly, incrementally, the mental jumping begins to slow down. Building a disciplined mind is an act of neural conditioning. You are strengthening literal neural pathways through repetition. It is a muscle that requires consistent resistance training.
Days, then weeks of pulling weeds. It's a grind.
Oh.
But the payoff is profound. The text is careful to emphasize that Ethan doesn't eradicate every negative thought forever.
That would be impossible.
Right. The weeds still occasionally pop up. But the exhaustion is gone. His mind is calmer, he has access to his own focus, and he realizes he is no longer the victim of his neurochemistry. And when he reunites with Marcus, he says this great line, I can't stop every thought, but I can choose which ones to follow.
I can choose which ones to follow. That is the operational definition of mental freedom right there. The weeds will always exist in the environment, sure, but he now has the agency and the tools to pluck them out before they establish a canopy and choke out everything else.
So what does this all mean? If we synthesize Ethan's journey and Marcus's framework, it brings us directly back to you, the listener. It's the realization that while you cannot control the initial emergence of an anxious or unhelpful thought, you cannot build a dam to stop the river, you have total agency over what happens next. You can build a stronger, intentional mind by starting incredibly small. It begins with just the simple act of noticing, implementing that 3-second pause to unfuse yourself from the chaos.
And within that 3-second pause, you can deploy the core diagnostic question from the text, carrying it into every hour of your day. Are my thoughts helping me or hurting me?
Such a great filter.
It's a binary filter that instantly cuts through the noise of rumination. If a thought isn't serving a productive purpose, you refuse to water it. You let it go and redirect your attention to what you actually can control.
And you don't need to retreat to a mountaintop to do this,
Oh,
right?
sure.
You can pull a mental weed while sitting in rush hour traffic or waiting for a meeting to start.
Which leaves us with a truly profound implication to consider as we wrap up this analysis. We've examined the daily mechanics of pulling the weeds of unhelpful thoughts and intentionally planting focus. And the text showed us Ethan's progress over a matter of weeks.
Right.
But if we project this forward, it raises a really compelling question about the long-term architecture of the brain.
Oh, I like where this is going.
Well, think about it. If you spend months or even years consistently refusing to give your attention to the weeds of anxiety, and instead you systematically cultivate calm and intentionality, what happens to the fundamental soil of your mind?
Wow.
Does the landscape of your brain eventually undergo such deep neuroplastic changes that the soil itself becomes inhospitable to unstructured worry? Like, does the baseline of your consciousness permanently shift so that those chaotic thoughts struggle to even take root in the first place?
The idea that you aren't just indefinitely managing a broken system, but actively rewriting the physical landscape of your brain so the weeds can't even grow, that is an incredibly powerful pursuit. We invite you to test these mechanics in your own mental garden this week. Carve out the pause, evaluate the roots, and see what you can grow. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. What if the most attractive person in the room isn't the one with the best clothes or like the sharpest wit?
Right, or the loudest voice.
Yeah, exactly. What if it's the one who simply doesn't care if you notice them at all? Like if you ever sat quietly in a room and just felt completely invisible while you compare yourself to literally everyone else.
Oh, absolutely.
It's like you are physically taking up space on a chair, but, energetically, you've just completely faded into the wallpaper.
Yeah, it's a really specific kind of isolation. You aren't physically alone, but you've somehow managed to completely erase your own presence.
You really have. And today's deep dive is taking a close look at that exact feeling. We're pulling insights from this really fascinating audio piece titled The Magnetic Power of Self-Acceptance. And we're specifically focusing on a segment called Why Confidence Feels More Attractive. And to really understand this, we're going to follow a real-world case study about a man named Daniel.
Right, Daniel.
And Daniel adds a really compelling layer to this universal feeling of inadequacy because he isn't just trying to fit into a standard office. He's navigating a native English-speaking workplace while he is still actively learning the language.
Which is, incredibly daunting. Navigating complex office dynamics is hard enough.
Oh, for sure.
But trying to do it when you constantly feel like you lack the basic vocabulary to express your true personality, that just adds this massive layer of vulnerability.
It really does.
So our mission today is to decode the true definition of attractiveness through Daniel's journey. We want to prove that true magnetism actually has very little to do with physical appearance or having a perfect vocabulary.
Right.
And more importantly, we are going to extract a practical, step-by-step guide on how you can move from feeling completely invisible to finally feeling seen.
It's just such a relatable struggle. I think about this feeling of inadequacy as being kind of similar to scrolling through a highly curated social media feed, but you're doing it in real life.
Well, that's a good way to put it.
Right. You look around the room at everyone else's seemingly perfect exterior. Like they have the perfect words, the perfect posture, the perfect cadence, and you just assume they have it all figured out.
Yeah, you assume they're flawless.
Exactly.
Huh.
And as a result of that assumption, you just mute your own voice. You cancel yourself out before anyone else even have the chance to interact with you.
And that internal muting is exactly where Daniel starts his journey. He is constantly looking at the people around him, and his internal monologue is just this relentless loop of comparison.
It's exhausting.
It is.
Yeah.
He looks at his native-speaking peers and he thinks, they sound so much smarter than me, or they look so much more relaxed than me.
And those thoughts, they aren't just flowing in the ether. They have immediate physical consequences.
Absolutely. What's fascinating here is how Daniel's internal monologue actually creates his external reality.
Yes. Because of this internal monologue, he actively avoids conversations at work. When he's in social situations, he listens, but he rarely speaks.
He retreats inward.
He does. And the ultimate result of that retreat is that he feels like a ghost. He decides he is less than, he acts like he is less than, and so the world treats him as if he isn't there.
It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. The lack of attractiveness isn't physical at all. It's this void of presence caused by his own self-censorship.
Wait, but if we feel disconnected, shouldn't evolution wire us to try harder to connect?
You would think so, yeah.
Like, why is our default reaction to feeling less than to literally shrink ourselves down and stop talking. You'd think our brains would tell us to speak up so we aren't left behind by the group.
Well, it all comes down to how the brain's threat detection system operates. We have to remember that our brains evolved in small hunter-gatherer tribes.
Right, where social rejection was dangerous.
Exactly. It literally meant death. If you were cast out of the group, you couldn't survive. So the amygdala, which is the brain's alarm system, it interprets social judgment as a literal physical threat.
Wow.
It doesn't know the difference between a judgmental coworker and a hungry predator.
So shrinking and staying quiet is essentially the evolutionary freeze response.
Yes, and it's a brilliant, if flawed, defense mechanism. By playing dead socially, the predator, in this case, judgment or embarrassment over his English passes right by.
Oh, I see.
If you don't speak, you can't mispronounce a word. If you don't take up space, you can't be pushed out of it.
Right. So Daniel is protecting his nervous system from the judgment he fears. But the tragic cost of that biological protection is total social isolation.
Exactly. He's successfully keeping himself safe from criticism, but in doing so, he's starving himself of human connection.
And he stays stuck in that survival mode until his perspective gets completely shattered. He starts watching someone at work who defies every single assumption he has about what makes a person popular or confident or attractive.
Enter his colleague, Alex.
Yes, Alex.
Alex is such a fascinating case study in magnetism. The source explicitly describes him as not being the most perfect-looking person.
Right, he doesn't look like a movie star.
No, and he isn't the loudest guy in the room either. He isn't delivering perfectly polished, charismatic monologues at the water cooler.
But despite all of that, people are just inexplicably drawn to him. Daniel watches Alex and is totally baffled. People genuinely like Alex. They linger at his desk.
They do. They really enjoy talking to him, and they seem deeply comfortable around him.
So Daniel, who has been obsessing over his own perceived physical and linguistic flaws, starts studying Alex like a scientist to figure out the secret.
And what he notices is stunningly simple. Alex speaks calmly. He smiles easily. He listens carefully. There is absolutely no grand performance happening.
Those traits sound simple, but they represent a massive shift in how we usually think about charm. Daniel realizes that attractiveness is actually about energy and presence.
Yes. Alex possesses this calming gravitational pull. By speaking calmly and actually listening, he creates a psychological safe space around him.
Here's where it gets really interesting, if I could use an analogy here.
Go for it.
The people Daniel was comparing himself to earlier, like the polished, loud, seemingly perfect coworkers, they are like stiff, scratchy designer suits.
Oh, I like that.
Right. You might admire a designer suit from across the room. It looks expensive, it commands attention, but it's fundamentally intimidating and uncomfortable to actually wear.
Yeah, you can't relax in it.
Exactly. Alex, on the other hand, is like a well-worn, incredibly comfortable sweater.
And building on that, the designer suit is entirely about the wearer trying to project their own status. It's basically a piece of armor designed to keep people at a respectful distance.
Hello.
The sweater, however, is entirely about how it makes the person interacting with it feel. It invites closeness. Alex's attractiveness has nothing to do with him projecting status or perfection.
It is entirely based on how his lack of armor makes other people feel.
Exactly.
Right. But, observing someone being a comfortable sweater from across the office is one thing. Figuring out how to knit that sweater for yourself is a completely different challenge.
It really is a leap.
Yeah, and Daniel reaches a breaking point where observation just isn't enough anymore. He finally approaches Alex and flat out asks for his secret.
And this is where we get the philosophical core of our entire deep dive. Daniel asks, how do you make people feel so comfortable? And Alex just smiles and says, I'm not trying to impress people. I'm just comfortable being myself.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because just be yourself is like the ultimate bumper sticker cliche.
It really is the classic advice.
Right. It sounds great on a motivational poster, but you can't just tell an anxious person who is terrified of speaking a second language to stop worrying.
No, you can't.
If someone is paralyzed by the fear of judgment, they can't just flip a switch in their brain and decide to be perfectly comfortable.
That is a very fair point, and it's why we need to look at the actual mechanism of what Alex is doing rather than just the cliche.
Okay.
We have to look at how confidence is an allocation of cognitive resources. Think of your brain's attention like RAM on a computer.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so when Daniel is in a conversation, 90% of his cognitive RAM is focused inward. He's thinking, did I pronounce that right? Is my accent too thick? Are they staring at my posture? Do I sound stupid?
which leaves him with maybe 10% of his brain power to actually listen to the person in front of him?
Exactly. And people subconsciously feel that lack of presence. They feel that you aren't really with them.
Wow, yeah.
What Alex is doing when he says, I'm not trying to impress people, is reallocating his RAM. Alex is taking 100% of his cognitive processing power and focusing it entirely outward onto the other person.
So by prioritizing listening carefully and being present, he literally doesn't have enough leftover RAM to panic about how he looks or sounds.
That's exactly it.
Ah, that is brilliant. It's
Yes.
a total redirection of energy. He isn't magically free of insecurities. He's just starving his insecurities of attention.
Right, he's depriving them of oxygen.
Yes. He's taking the spotlight off his own internal monologue and shining it brightly on whoever's speaking to him. And when you shine that spotlight on someone else, they feel deeply seen, which makes them feel incredibly warm towards you.
It is the ultimate paradigm shift. And Alex actually gives Daniel a 4-part framework to practice this reallocation of RAM.
What are the 4 parts?
He says, don't fear judgment, speak calmly, listen more, and be present. Confidence isn't about the absence of flaws. It is simply about your flaws no longer consuming all of your attention.
But, knowing the mechanics of cognitive RAM still doesn't make it an overnight fix. Daniel doesn't walk into work the next day suddenly operating at 100% outward focus.
No, the anxiety is too deeply ingrained for that.
Right. So Daniel realizes he needs to train his brain and his nervous system in a safe environment before he can deploy this at the office. We move from the philosophy of self-acceptance into the gritty, literal mechanics of how he builds it.
And this is where Daniel leverages his English language learning to fundamentally change his self-image. He starts incredibly small, in the privacy of his own home.
Okay.
He picks up a book called Short Stories in English for Beginners. It's a teach yourself book. And he just starts reading the text out loud to an empty room.
Wait, why out loud, though? If he's just trying to learn vocabulary, he could just read silently, right?
He could, but because it isn't just about vocabulary, it's about nervous system desensitization.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. When you spend months or years shrinking yourself and staying quiet to avoid judgment, the literal sound of your own voice taking up space in a room feels alien and alarming.
Wow.
By reading out loud, Daniel is getting his brain and his body used to the physical vibration of his own presence. He is normalizing his own voice without the threat of a native speaker judging his pronunciation.
He's basically proving to his amygdala that speaking doesn't equal death. And then he escalates the practice. A day or so later, he moves to a second resource, a book called Learn English Through Stories. 16 stories to improve your English grammar and English vocabulary.
Yes.
But this time, he doesn't just read the words on the page. He forces himself to practice his own thoughts. After a story, he says out loud to the empty room, I think this story is interesting because, using simple, direct sentences.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we can look at this through the lens of neuroplasticity. Confidence is a practice skill. It is muscle memory.
Yeah.
Imagine Daniel's anxiety is like water flowing down the side of a mountain. For years, that water has carved a very deep, very fast riverbed. That deep riverbed is his default habit self-censorship, inward focus, shrinking.
So when he tries to speak up at work, the water naturally wants to violently rush down that deep anxiety trench because it's the path of least resistance.
Yes. And what Daniel is doing in his room with these grammar books is manually digging a brand new, incredibly shallow irrigation trench.
Oh, that makes sense.
It takes a massive amount of forced effort to divert the water out of the deep riverbed and into this new tiny trench of sharing an opinion. But every single time he says, I think this story is interesting because, he carves that new trench a little deeper. He is literally rewiring his brain's default pathways.
It makes so much sense when you view it as a mechanical process.
Yeah.
You would never expect water to suddenly flow uphill on its own.
No, of course not.
And you would never expect yourself to be perfectly fluent on day one of studying a new language. You wouldn't be furious at yourself for stumbling over basic grammar on the first try.
Right.
So why do we hold ourselves to the impossible standard of being flawlessly confident on our very first try in a high-stakes social setting?
We shouldn't, but society trains us to expect instant charisma. Daniel's third resource directly attacks that expectation.
What was the third resource?
He starts listening to an audio program called Effortless English, Learn to Speak English Like a Native. And the core philosophical message he internalizes from this isn't just about verb tenses.
What is it about?
It's an instruction to relax, speak naturally, and above all, completely abandon the need to be perfect.
So he is aggressively reprogramming his internal monologue. He's replacing the old tape that played "They Sound So Much Smarter Than Me" with a new tape that says, "Confidence comes from practice, not from waiting."
Yes.
He stops waiting for confidence to magically arise so he can start participating in life. He realizes he has to participate awkwardly first in order to generate the confidence.
That is the crucial pivot in his journey. He accepts that the awkwardness is the toll he has to pay on the road to magnetism.
But, practicing alone in your bedroom is kind of the shallow end of the pool.
It is.
Eventually, if he wants to stop feeling invisible, Daniel has to test his newly dug neurological trenches in the real world. He has to take his practice back into the native-speaking office environment.
And when he does, he uses Alex's framework, but he keeps his expectations incredibly grounded. He starts small. He doesn't try to lead a massive boardroom presentation. He simply speaks a little more in casual passing. He actively chooses to smile. He forces himself to maintain eye contact rather than looking at the floor.
I really appreciate how honest the audio piece is about how this initial phase feels. It explicitly notes that it feels highly uncomfortable for Daniel at first.
That's not easy.
Right. It isn't a cinematic montage where suddenly the lighting changes, a pop song plays, and everyone is carrying him on their shoulders.
No.
It feels clunky. His heart probably races. The water is still fighting to go back down that deep anxiety riverbed. But he forces it into the new trench anyway. He continues.
And because he doesn't quit during the awkward phase, the psychological feedback loop finally begins to activate.
Yes, sir.
Well, Daniel changed his internal energy through his private reading practice. That internal change shifted his external behavior. He smiled, held eye contact, and spoke up. That external behavior then fundamentally changed how others treated him. His coworkers began to respond differently. They smiled back. They instinctively included him in the spatial dynamics of a group.
And the culmination of all this work happens during a standard office conversation. Daniel takes a breath, focuses 100% of his cognitive RAM outward, and speaks clearly and calmly to share an idea.
And he isn't trying to sound like a genius.
No, he just states his thought. And people pause. They listen. They engage with his idea. For the very first time, Daniel feels completely, undeniably seen.
That moment is the ultimate proof of the lesson from our deep dive. When Daniel finally stopped judging himself, he stopped projecting a defensive energy.
Yeah.
When he felt comfortable with himself, flaws and all, others instinctively felt comfortable with him. True magnetism is deeply rooted in energy and presence, not in flawless execution.
So what does this all mean? When we look at that initial clunky discomfort Daniel felt when he first tried this at work, it is so crucial for you, the listener, to realize that discomfort is not a sign of failure. It is the literal sensation of growth. It is the feeling of your brain carving a new pathway, like breaking in a new pair of shoes. Daniel had to walk through the fire of his own awkwardness to get to the point where his new behavior felt like his own skin.
The discomfort is the price of admission to a larger life.
As we wrap up this deep dive, let's distill the ultimate takeaways for you to carry forward into your own life. We've learned that confidence isn't a genetic lottery ticket.
No, it's not.
It is a practice skill. You cannot wait around for it to suddenly wash over you before you start living. You have to start small. Read out loud to yourself if you need to get used to the sound of your own voice taking up space.
Yes, practice it.
Start allocating your cognitive RAM outward to the people around you. Speak a little more.
Yeah.
Smile. Be present. And most importantly, as Alex taught Daniel, stop trying to impress the room and just allow yourself to exist in it.
It's an incredibly powerful transformation. Daniel went from being a ghost, fading into the wallpaper out of fear, to someone who finally felt seen and included entirely by shifting his internal focus.
It's amazing.
But before we leave you today, I want to offer a final lingering thought that builds on Alex's philosophy of not trying to impress people.
Oh, I am all ears.
The journey we just analyzed focuses heavily on Daniel building his confidence so that his peers will finally include him, so that he can achieve that deeply human desire of being seen by the group.
Right.
But consider this for your own life moving forward. What if the ultimate highest level of self-acceptance isn't actually about successfully getting other people to see you?
What do you mean?
What if true mastery is reaching a state of such deep, profound internal comfort that you simply no longer care whether you are visible to the room or not?
Wow. You stop analyzing the wallpaper entirely because you're finally just enjoying the room. It's definitely something to think about.
You know, there is this incredibly universal, incredibly frustrating experience that I think almost everyone listening to this right now has gone through at least once.
Oh, for sure. It's almost unavoidable.
Right. It's that moment where you have studied a topic endlessly. You've read the books, you've taken all the notes, you've memorized the rules.
You feel like an absolute expert.
Exactly, but only in the safety of your own bedroom. And then the universe kind of taps you on the shoulder and asks you to actually do the thing in real life.
And that's when the panic sets in.
Yeah, you just freeze. Your brain completely empties out.
It is a uniquely humbling experience, honestly. Psychologists actually call this the illusion of competence.
The illusion of competence. I like that.
Yeah, it's when you mistake your ability to recognize information on a page for the ability to, generate that information from scratch out in the real world.
Because you have all the theory, but absolutely zero practical execution.
Precisely. I mean, it happens in sports. It happens when you're trying to learn to code. But it perhaps happens most dramatically when we are trying to learn a new language.
Oh, 100%.
The gap between knowing grammatical rules and actually opening your mouth to speak is just enormous.
Which is exactly why we're here today.
Yeah.
When you freeze up like that, you're experiencing the exact chasm we are diving into.
It's a fascinating problem to pull apart.
It really is. So we're looking at a case study from an excerpt called Mastering the Art of Natural Daily English Conversation.
Which originates from the Easy English podcast, right?
Yes, exactly. And we're going to use the journey of an English language learner, a woman named Emma, as our primary lens today.
She's a great example for this.
But really, the mission for this deep dive is exploring the mechanics of moving from passive studying to active, messy, real-world execution.
And it is going to be messy.
Always. Okay, let's unpack this. Because if we look at Emma's situation, it is just so relatable. On paper, I mean, she's doing everything right.
Oh, in an academic setting, Emma's probably a star pupil.
Right.
She's been learning English for a long time. She understands a lot of what she hears. She's a phenomenal reader, and she's built up this vast, impressive reservoir of vocabulary.
Not to mention the grammar rules. She has put in the hours.
She really has. She has all the data.
But then we zoom out from her quiet study desk, and we place her in the chaotic real world. And this is where she hits an absolute brick wall.
The real world doesn't care about your flashcards, unfortunately.
No, it doesn't. And the case study pinpoints 3 very specific, very everyday roadblocks she faces.
Let's look at those.
First, she's at a cafe and just wants to order a simple coffee. But she hesitates, and the moment just passes.
Classic freezing up.
Yeah. Then she's at work and wants to ask a really basic question about a project, but she stays quiet.
Which is so frustrating when you know the answer is right there.
And finally, she's around her coworkers. She wants to join their casual conversation, but she literally doesn't know how to start. She just remains silent.
And that silence, it isn't peaceful. It's incredibly heavy. Her internal monologue is kind of the crux of this entire phenomenon.
What is she thinking in those moments?
She thinks to herself, I know English, but I don't know how to use it in real life.
Wow. Yeah, that hits hard. It actually makes me think of an analogy.
Okay, let's hear it.
It's exactly like spending 6 months memorizing the engineering manual of a bicycle.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
Right. Like, you know precisely how the gear ratios work. You understand the physics of the rubber hitting the road. You could probably pass a written exam on the mechanics of the pedals. But the very first time you actually sit on the seat and try to pedal, you immediately fall over.
Because reading about balance is fundamentally different from the physical act of balancing. That is a perfect way to conceptualize it.
It's totally different muscles.
Literally and figuratively. The difference between academic knowledge and practical application comes down to cognitive load. And really, how our memory systems work.
Cognitive load. So what's actually happening in Emma's brain at that cafe?
Well, it isn't a lack of knowledge. It's an absolute overload of it. When she approaches the barista, she isn't just trying to say coffee.
What's she doing?
Her brain is rapidly pulling up thousands of vocabulary words, sorting through complex verb tenses, and trying to consciously construct the absolute, perfect, grammatically flawless sentence.
So she's essentially doing advanced calculus in her head just to get a cappuccino.
Precisely. And human working memory is like a very small whiteboard.
Okay.
You can only hold a few items on it at a time. If Emma's whiteboard is completely filled with grammar rules and vocabulary options,
there's no room left for anything else.
Exactly. There's no room to process the environment, the barista's facial expressions, or her own social anxiety.
Right, because language in a real-time social setting moves way too fast for that kind of conscious, deliberate calculation.
This is textbook analysis paralysis. The complexity of the rules she memorized leads to nervousness.
And that nervousness shrinks the whiteboard even further.
Yes. which leads to overthinking. And overthinking inevitably leads to hesitation and silence. The brain just crashes like an overloaded computer.
So for you listening right now, I want you to think about a time you felt exactly like Emma.
We've all been there.
We have. Maybe it wasn't a language. Maybe it was a complex software program you took a certification course on, or a musical instrument you learned from YouTube tutorials.
You're completely equipped with the theory.
But the moment you had an audience, or the moment the stakes were real, you were paralyzed by the practice. It's a terrible feeling.
It really is. But this is where the dynamic shifts in our case study.
Yes, Emma recognizes that she's stuck in this academic trap. So she seeks out a colleague named Jake, who seems to effortlessly navigate the exact situations that paralyze her.
Jake is fascinating because he represents the exact opposite of Emma's approach.
How so?
He speaks English easily, but his sentences are notably simple. They aren't overly complex, yet they sound entirely natural.
Right, and when Emma asks him for his secret to doing this, his advice sounds almost frustratingly obvious at first glance.
He tells her daily English is not about difficult words, it's about simple phrases.
Simple phrases.
Yeah, and then he gives her a very specific blueprint of foundational examples. He tells her to rely on things like, "Hi, how are you? How was your day? Can you help me with this?"
And also, "I'd like to order, and I think this is a good idea."
Those 5 phrases might look incredibly basic, maybe even a little boring, but functionally, they are brilliant.
Okay, wait. I have to push back here for a second.
Sir, go ahead.
If I am Emma, right, and I have spent years meticulously studying complex sentence structures, advanced vocabulary, and, the finer points of the past perfect continuous tense,
Right.
isn't relying on these super basic phrases a massive step backward? Like, it feels like dumbing it down?
I can see why it feels that way.
If she has studied advanced grammar, shouldn't she be forcing herself to use it? Otherwise, what was the point of all that studying?
What's fascinating here is that we have a cultural tendency to equate complexity with competence, especially when we're learning something new.
We think if it's not hard, it's not good.
Exactly. But Jake isn't dumbing it down. He's prioritizing utility over complexity. He understands that in daily life, communication rarely requires poetry.
So what does it require?
It relies on predictable patterns.
Predictable patterns. Okay, let's dig into that. How does relying on a pattern solve Emma's cafe problem?
Well, think about your own native language. When you go to a coffee shop, you aren't inventing a brand new, beautifully complex, never-before-heard sentence every time you order.
That's true. I just say the same thing every morning.
Right, you're deploying a prepackaged phrase. "I'll have a large drip coffee, please."
I definitely don't think about the subject-verb agreement of that sentence.
Because it's a single, unbroken unit of meaning in your brain. By telling Emma to master these simple phrases, Jake is telling her to build a library of prepackaged units.
Ah, I get it.
He's essentially saying, stop trying to build a custom car from scratch every time you go to the store. Just take the bus.
Just take the bus. That completely reframes the goal. You don't need to invent language from scratch in everyday situations. You just need to deploy the right tool for the job.
Exactly. And this goes right back to the cognitive load we discussed.
The tiny whiteboard.
Yes. When you use a simple prepackaged phrase, you clear off that mental whiteboard. You remove the burden of translating complex grammar on the spot.
And when you free up that mental energy, what happens?
You can finally focus on what actually matters, human connection. You can look the barista in the eye, you can smile, you can read their body language.
Because that is what makes a conversation natural, not the complexity of the vocabulary.
Precisely. Jake's philosophy seamlessly shifts Emma's entire objective. She goes from trying to speak perfectly in a grand academic way to just aiming to speak in small moments every day.
But, knowing that she needs to use simple phrases is one thing. Actually rewiring her brain to do it is another.
It's a huge transition.
Right. If you've spent years being a perfectionist, how do you physically bridge that gap?
Well, Jake doesn't just leave her with a motivational quote. He gives her a highly specific, 3-pronged practice strategy.
And this is where we really see the transition from passive studying to active doing.
It's a deliberate, step-by-step, physical and mental rewiring. And it begins with a critical behavioral shift.
That evening, Emma decides to start, and she specifically stops scrolling on her phone.
A miracle in itself.
Right. She reclaims her attention and opens the first resource Jake suggested, which is a book called Short Stories in English for Beginners from the Teach Yourself series.
And what she does with this book is the crucial differentiator.
She doesn't just read it silently on the couch, she reads the short stories out loud.
Reading out loud is the essential first step in breaking the illusion of competence.
Why is that so important?
When you read silently, your brain remains in the realm of abstract theory. Your eyes scan the words and your brain says, yes, I understand this.
But you're not actually doing anything.
Exactly. But the moment you force yourself to speak those words out loud, you are bridging the gap between the mind and the physical body.
You're actually engaging your muscle.
Your motor cortex, specifically.
Yeah.
You are literally training the muscles of your mouth, your tongue, and your vocal cords to physically produce unfamiliar sounds.
So it's a completely different neurological process.
Completely. And you're also forcing your auditory system to hear your own voice speaking the language.
Which gives you immediate real-time feedback. It turns a passive mental exercise into an active physical drill.
Exactly. Now, after that, she progresses to the second step of the strategy.
Right. She picks up another resource. Learn English through stories, 16 stories, to improve your English grammar and English vocabulary.
With this one, she isn't just reading out loud. She reads, and then she repeats the sentences.
And through this repetition, she starts noticing patterns, common phrases, and useful expressions.
This is where we see the transition from basic physical practice to deep cognitive pattern recognition. Cognitive scientists call this chunking.
Chunking. I like that word.
By repeating the sentences over and over, she isn't analyzing the grammar word by word anymore. She's internalizing blocks of meaning.
She's noticing how those simple phrases Jack mentioned, like, can you help me with this, are constructed and deployed in various contexts.
She is stocking her mental library with those prepackaged phrases so she doesn't have to build them from scratch later.
Which means she's moving the knowledge from declarative memory, which is knowing that a rule exists, into procedural memory.
Yes, which is knowing how to execute a skill automatically.
Which sets her up perfectly for the final and I think most fascinating step of Jake's roadmap.
The third resource.
Yeah. A few days later, she moves to a third resource. Effortless English. Learn to speak English like a native.
And Jake's specific instruction for how to use this resource is where the magic really happens.
He tells her to listen and repeat, but he adds a vital, counterintuitive caveat. Don't think too much.
Which is so hard to do.
Seriously. Emma takes this audio, puts her headphones on, and listens and repeats while she's out walking alone.
Don't think too much. It feels like the ultimate antidote to her cafe paralysis.
But I want to dig into the mechanics of this. Why is this specific progression so incredibly effective?
You mean the reading out loud, then repeating for patterns, then walking and not thinking?
Yes. It reminds me heavily of athletic drills. Like, first, you learn the raw mechanics of a baseball swing in slow motion, breaking down every wrist movement.
Right, isolating the mechanics.
Then you take a batting practice in a cage over and over to recognize the pattern of the pitch.
Building the pattern recognition.
And finally, you just get into a real game and swing. You trust that muscle memory will take over so you don't even have to consciously think about your elbows or your grip.
That is exactly what is happening cognitively, and the athletic analogy is spot on.
Really?
Yeah, this methodology systematically dismantles the hesitation Emma felt at the very beginning by changing where her brain is processing the language.
Oh, that makes sense.
Step 1, built the mechanical comfort in her mouth. Step 2, built the structural library of chunks.
And step 3?
Step 3, listening and repeating while walking and not thinking builds the instinct.
Why does the walking matter, though?
Because walking is a mild physical distraction. By telling her to do this while walking, Jake is intentionally giving her prefrontal cortex, the conscious, analytical, overthinking part of her brain, something else to monitor.
It keeps the overanalyzer busy.
Yes. This allows the deeper parts of the brain, like the basal ganglia, which handle automatic habits and procedural memory, to take over the language processing.
So she is literally occupying her body so her analytical brain stops getting in its own way.
Exactly. Slowly, the dynamic shifts. English begins to feel less like an academic subject she is studying, and more like an instinctive action she is performing.
She has successfully transitioned from memorizing the rules of the bicycle to actually pedaling it.
But of course, muscle memory and procedural habits are useless if you only ever practice them in an empty stadium or on a lonely walk.
Right. Eventually, Emma had to take this new instinct back into the very environments that paralyzed her in the first place.
The true test.
Which brings us to the real-world application. Emma makes her return to the cafe and to her office, and the contrast is profound.
It's a complete behavioral shift. At the cafe, where she previously locked up trying to formulate the perfect sentence, she now approaches the barista and simply says, "I'd like a coffee, please."
And she does this without hesitation.
None.
She didn't overcomplicate it. She didn't try to impress the barista with her mastery of advanced vocabulary.
She deployed a simple prepackaged phrase.
And it worked. She got her coffee.
Then she goes to work.
Right. Before, she stayed quiet instead of asking a project question. Now she walks up to a colleague, her voice calm and natural, and asks, "Can you help me with this?"
A huge leap for her.
And with her coworkers in the break room, where she previously had no idea how to initiate interaction, she just smiles and uses the most basic tool in the kit. "How was your day?"
And a conversation naturally unfolds.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. What is crucial to point out here is that the narrative doesn't pretend she suddenly became a flawless orator.
No, not at all. It explicitly notes that at first her sentences are short, and they are sometimes not perfect.
She still makes mistakes.
But the absolute key difference is she keeps going.
Yes, she allows herself to be imperfect. She accepts the messiness. And over time, the messiness refines itself.
Practice makes progress.
Weeks pass. Emma continues practicing this exact way every day. Small conversations, simple phrases, real situations.
And then she notices something surprising.
She realizes she's speaking faster, her confidence is much stronger, and most importantly, she is speaking without thinking too much.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is the ultimate lesson of Emma's journey. Real progress happens in real conversations, not in textbooks.
Perfection is the absolute enemy of progress.
It really is. When Emma was aiming for perfect, complex grammar, she stayed silent. She essentially removed herself from the playing field.
But when she embraced short, simple, and sometimes imperfect sentences, she got in the game.
Because the goal isn't a flawless performance.
The goal is participation.
Exactly. Because language, at its core, is a tool for connection. If you wait until you can use the tool flawlessly before you ever pick it up, you will never connect with anyone.
You have to be willing to use the tool clumsily at first.
The clumsiness isn't a sign of failure. It's a mandatory phase of mastery.
So for you listening, let's bring this right back to your own life and your own goals.
Think about what you're trying to achieve right now.
Whether you're learning a new language like Emma, or you're trying to pick up a coding skill, or you're trying to get better at public speaking,
Or even just trying to become a more active listener in your relationships.
do not wait for perfect conditions to start participating. You cannot study your way out of the awkward beginner phase. You just have to wade through it.
The transition from a passive learner to an active participant requires you to abandon the safety of the instruction manual.
You have to be willing to fall off the bicycle a few times in public.
That is where the actual learning happens. The friction of the real world is what shapes your fragile theoretical knowledge into durable practical skill.
So to summarize what we've pulled from this case study today, daily conversational success, and really success in executing any learned skill, is about utilizing simple tools in real situations.
It's about starting small.
It's about physically practicing those small things every single day to build procedural memory.
And above all, it is about completely letting go of the anxiety of making mistakes.
It is about valuing the connection over the correction. Emma's journey illustrates that studying gets you to the starting line, but only simple, imperfect action gets you down the track.
It's such a powerful reframe. You don't need to be brilliant every time you open your mouth. You just need to be clear and present.
Because waiting for perfect keeps you entirely silent, while embracing the simple and messy leads to genuine, natural fluency over time.
Absolutely.
Which leaves us with a lingering question for you to mull over. We've seen how over-studying the theory kept Emma frozen at the cafe, trapped by the illusion of competence.
Where else in your life is that happening?
Exactly. Where else in your life are you currently overstudying the theory, memorizing every single page of the instruction manual, when what you really need to do is step out, make a few messy mistakes, and just start pedaling the bicycle?